Chapter 983. The first 8 updates were mainly targeted at Overlord mode, while the next 4 were closely related to adventuring players. 9. Introduction of Equipment Binding System. Due to the high cost of adventuring players reincarnating, especially after their equipment was dropped, if no one picked it up, it would be a terrible loss for the players. It would begin to affect the game's balance. Gaia had introduced an equipment binding system at the right time. Players only needed to spend 1/10 of the equipment's value to have their equipment soulbound. It would not drop even if they died. The equipment's value would be automatically determined by the system. To high-end players, this was no doubt a blessing. It was equivalent to buying insurance. 10. Introduction of Special Elixir System. This update was also to compensate adventuring players. Gaia would put in some rare missions in the underground world. There was a chance of obtaining elixirs, such as EXP pills and cultivation pills. Reincarnated players could use such elixirs to quickly raise their level and cultivation techniques, shortening their cultivation time. The Book of Changes had a saying, "The Great Tao is 50 and the heavens are 49. Escape 1. Escape 1 was a chance of survival. Gaia clearly did not want to go to extremes. For adventuring players with talent, even if they were unfortunate to reincarnate, there was a chance for them to make a comeback with the help of elixirs. Through the first 2 updates, Ouyang Shaw vaguely sensed that Gaia was perhaps paving the way for a large-scale national war. Only by reducing the losses of reincarnation could they maximize the enthusiasm of adventuring players for the national war. 11. World Martial Tournament. In the last round of system updates, in order to satisfy players' desire for PK, Gaia had introduced an arena system at the right time. This time, with the arena as a foundation, they would introduce an even more exciting World Martial Tournament. To put it bluntly, it was a world tournament. Starting from Gaia's 5th year, the tournament would be held every year. In the first half of the year, the top 10 players in the arena would be determined with the capital cities, including territories, as the competition zones. The top 10 players would receive the title of top 10 experts of the capital city and related rewards. The title would augment one's attributes, and the rewards would be dark gold ranked. There was a tiny chance of a purple gold ranked item. The person ranked first would definitely receive a purple gold ranked item. In autumn, the top 10 experts of the capital city would gather in a competition zone with the country as the competition zones. A new round of PK would be held to determine the top 10 experts of the world. At the same time, more generous rewards would be given. The rewards for this round were based on purple gold rank items. There was a very small chance of obtaining a low-grade divine artifact, and the person who ranked first had a 100% chance of obtaining a low-grade divine artifact. If a country only had one capital city and no territory or capital city, then this round would automatically merge with the previous round. In winter, the top 10 experts of all countries would gather in the city in the sky to determine the top 10 experts of the world through a knockout competition, and to obtain the highest honor of being the best in the world. The top 10 in the world would at least receive a low-grade divine artifact as a reward. The first place would definitely receive a middle-grade divine artifact. If one's fortune source was deep enough, they might even receive a high-grade divine artifact. More importantly, the title of number 1 in the world didn't just reward an individual, but also a country's honor points. This meant that adventuring players had the chance to fight for the country, just like the lords. The moment this update came out, whether it was the Guild Overlord, the Hermit of the Mountain, or the Wandering Swordsman, not a single one of them could resist such a temptation. Every single one of them rubbed their palms in anticipation. As the saying goes, there is no first in literature and no second in martial arts. The competition between adventuring players was intense to begin with. Now, with Gaia providing such a platform that could bring in both fame and fortune, it pushed the competition between martial artists to its peak. Ouyang Shaw was more interested in the deeper meaning behind Gaia's actions. Perhaps Gaia was already promoting Planet of Hope. In the Atlas, Ouyang Shaw had seen the powerful individual creatures of Planet of Hope. Therefore, it needed a group of heroes to shed their blood and sacrifice themselves. Advocating strength was definitely not outdated in times of war. 12. Introducing Grandmaster Dao verification system. Gaia upheld fairness. The first three were mainly for combat professional players. Gaia naturally would not ignore the larger group of lifestyle players. The so-called Grandmaster Dao verification meant that once a lifestyle player broke through the bottleneck and advanced to Grandmaster, they would receive an exclusive title and generous rewards. There were no additional conditions. The rewards were similar to the top 10 experts of the world. The rewards would be given whenever one advanced. As for the highest level of Godmaster, the rewards would be on par with the top 10 experts of the world. The first person to be promoted to Godmaster would also receive a special prize. Gaia was still very clear-headed. Combat professional players might be famous, but the ones that could truly support the game's foundation were the unknown lifestyle players. Even on Planet of Hope, with the 10 years of tempering in the game, they would be able to showcase their strengths, especially those Grandmasters or even celestial geniuses. Even on Planet of Hope, they would be able to hold their own. After reading the system update in one go, Ouyang Shuo felt mixed emotions. As he stood at a sufficiently high position, he could understand Gaia's intentions. So, they're already speeding up their preparations for Planet of Hope. Ouyang Shuo muttered to himself, "What unknown danger is hidden on that mysterious planet? Why is Gaia so prepared for it?" No one could answer Ouyang Shuo. At this moment, another system announcement sounded. World announcement. On the 4th anniversary of Earth's ONLE's launch, the game will be releasing the 4th expansion pack, Empire's Crusade. Please log on to the official website for the details. Ouyang Shuo took a deep breath. The war between nations has really come. Previously, the attack on Morocco and Somalia was only an individual action of Great Xia. When the expansion pack was officially released, it meant that the era of all-out war led by Gaia had officially arrived. Ouyang Shuo couldn't wait to check the relevant settings. First, Gaia introduced the concept of Month of War. Ever since Gaia's 5th year, June every year was designated as the Month of War by Gaia, granting it many conveniences. Firstly, only during the Month of War would one be able to enjoy the buff brought by the National Honor Points. Great Xia had successively attacked Star Nation, Morocco, and Somalia, earning the China region 30 National Honor Points. This was equivalent to a 30% buff, which was very impressive. Secondly, only during the Month of War would the geographical borders that couldn't be crossed become smooth. Take the border between Great Xia and Annam as an example. It was an endless stretch of towering rocky mountains that couldn't be crossed at all. In June, the miraculous natural moat would become a passageway. Just this alone was enough for Ouyang Shuo to resolve the issue of Annam completely before Gaia's 5th year and 6th month. This was to prevent Annam from causing trouble during the war and attacking Great Xia's hinterland. Ouyang Shuo didn't have the intention to take advantage of the war to attack Annam. As the saying went, good steel should be used on the blade. In the first month of war, with the willpower of the China region's players, there was no need to think about anything else. They would definitely target Japan, and Ouyang Shuo didn't want to complicate matters. Thirdly, only during the month of war would one be able to enjoy the contribution points bonus. It was different from Great Xia's attack on Morocco. A true nation war was a war where the entire population participated. Just like a large-scale military campaign, there would be a nation war contribution point bonus. Be it for capturing the flag or providing logistical reinforcements, the powerful Gaia will be able to evaluate every participant's contribution points after the end of the nation war. The nation war contribution points were basically similar to the military campaign contribution points. Overlord players could exchange them for contribution points or use them to revive the troops that died in battle. Adventurer players could use them to offset the cost of reincarnation or exchange for items. By then, the nation war market would be filled with a dazzling array of goods. It could be said that a nation war would be a feast for the victorious country. During the month of war, players would enjoy a bonus of 50 nation war contribution points. Just based on this, no country would be foolish enough to start a nation war at any other time. Gaia's enticement was to turn the month of June into a purely chaotic nation war. At other times, they would either prepare for the nation war or lick their wounds. They wouldn't allow the nation war to occupy the entire year. Secondly, the setting of a nation war leader had officially surfaced. Every country had to choose a nation war leader before the month of war arrived. The nation war leader would represent the country in defining the nation war's objectives, strategies, and buffs, as well as coordinating the entire nation war. On the official website, Gaia listed out the rights and duties of the nation war leader in detail. After reading it, the first thought that came to the players' minds was that a good nation war leader was comparable to an army of thousands, but a bad nation war leader could drag them into the abyss. How would the nation war leader be chosen? It was very simple. Gaia would open up a voting channel in the various countries' forums. Each person would have one vote, and by the 1st of May, the person with the highest number of votes would be the nation war leader. If this was 2 years ago, Ouyang Shua might not have been able to defeat Dichon with such a method. But now Ouyang Shua was basically in the bag. Of course, if Ouyang Shua insisted on provoking a civil war with the Yin-Huang alliance during this period, allowing Dichon to stand on the moral high ground, the outcome might be different. Finally, there was the setting of the nation weapon. Due to a deviation in history, the nation weapon settings in this world were different from the previous world. According to Gaia's newly announced nation weapon settings, every country had a basic nation weapon. Every time the country honor points exceeded 100 points, a new nation weapon would be born. Apart from special circumstances, 100 country honor points was equivalent to destroying 10 countries. Even after the game ended, not many countries would be able to obtain a second nation weapon. The China region's basic nation weapon was none other than the number 1 sacred sword, Xianyuan sword. This sword was no secret, and it was currently in the possession of the Yellow Emperor. Ever since the Yin-Huang tribe sent envoys to congratulate the Great Xia dynasty, the two tribes were no longer secret. Even so, no one dared to covet the Xianyuan sword and try to snatch it away. What was interesting was that Gaia stipulated that if the nation war leader was able to bring the nation weapon into battle, they would automatically receive a boost from the nation's luck, which was beneficial to the nation war. This was probably a test for the nation war leader, and even Ouyang Shua did not have the confidence. As a master of Confucianism, Wang Shoren, together with Confucius, the founder of Confucianism, Mencius, and Zhu Xi, were known as Confucius, Mencius, Zhu, and Wang. For 500 years, the source of Confucianism was Wang Yangming's unity of knowledge and action. Wang Yangming's philosophy, which had always been criticized by people, was a great achievement in the development of Chinese intelligence. Nowadays, there weren't many people who were qualified to criticize it. Mr. Yangming, who appeared in front of Ouyang Shua, was thin and his cheeks were sunken in. He looked like a person who cultivated in the deep mountains and not an official. Ouyang Shua said, "Teacher Confucius is studying in the Southwest University China Hall. Would you be willing to emulate him?" Whether it was for public or private reasons, Ouyang Shua hoped that the School of Heart would be able to shine even brighter in Great Xia. Unexpectedly, Wang Yangming smiled and said, "The Confucianism is about unity of knowledge and action. It can't be perfected in the academy. I hope that your majesty will allow me to go to the local area to experience the people's feelings and perfect the Confucianism." Ouyang Shua suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Good. North Sichuan province is lacking a governor. You can go there." Wang Yangming bowed from afar and accepted the position. The historical talent recruited by the Golden Platform was none other than Yin Song's favorite disciple, Hu Zongxian. Name: Hu Zongxian, Emperor level, Dynasty, Ming Dynasty, Identity, Civil Official of Xia Occupation, Civil Official Loyalty, 75 points Commander, 72 Force, Fort Intelligence, 80 Politics, 85 Specialty, loyal to the country, increases the dynasty's administrative efficiency by 20, increases the dynasty's governance level by 10. Evaluation. Hu Zongxian is skilled in politics, likes fame, and is talented. Emperor Jiajing called him the pillar of the southeast. Hu Zongxian's family was a member of the embroidered uniform guards. In the 19th year of Jiajing, he was appointed as the county magistrate of Shandong's Qingzhou Prefecture, Yidu County. He was promoted to Zhujiang's inspector of the imperial censor. He served as an official for 29 years and was loyal to the country. During the Japanese rebellion in the southeast, he served as the governor of Zhujiang and fought against the Japanese. In the 41st year of Jiajing, Hu Zongxian led the war against the Japanese and achieved an unprecedented victory. He gradually pacified the Japanese in Zhujiang and began to exterminate the Japanese pirates in Fujian. He never thought that the day Hu Zongxian succeeded would be the day his misfortune befell him. In the same year, the cabinet assistant Yin Song was dismissed and his son Yin Shifan was arrested. As a member of the Yin clique, Hu Zongxian did not have a backer in the imperial court. Under the instruction of the new cabinet assistant Su Jia, Lu Fengyi, the Nanjing imperial censor, impeached Hu Zongxian for 10 major crimes, including embezzlement of military funds, excessive taxation, and shielding Yin Song. In the 44th year of Jiajing, 2 years after Hu Zongxian was dismissed, he was once again taken to the capital. In prison, he wrote the poem, "A treasured sword is buried in the unjust prison. A loyal soul lingers on the clouds." In the 6th year of Longqing, the imperial court rehabilitated Hu Zongxian and gave him the posthumous title of Xiang Mao. Ouyang Shouan naturally cherished a capable person like Hu Zongxian, but he did not immediately assign any position to Hu Zongxian. With Hu Zongxian's talent, the best place to go was to be the governor of a province. However, there were no vacancies in any provinces. Ouyang Shouan planned to wait until Annan was conquered before making further plans. Ouyang Shouan said, "Ruzhun, you don't have to be anxious. Stay in the imperial court and observe the affairs. I have my own arrangements." I understand. Since his advisor, Yin Song, had already entered the cabinet, Hu Zongxian was naturally not in a hurry. The general recruited by the general selection platform had a history with Hu Zongxian. It was the famous Ming Dynasty general, Qi Jiguang. Name, Qi Jiguang, Emperor level, Dynasty, Ming Dynasty, identity. Great Xia general, occupation, high-level general, loyalty, 75 points commander-in-chief, 78 points martial power, 70 points intelligence, 50 points politics, 55 specialty, famous anti-Japanese general, increases the troops' attack power by 25, increases the troops' naval combat level by 15, increases the troops' marching speed by 20. Works, Ji Zhao's new book, and records of troop training. Remarks, Jiguang was a general who gave strict orders and was trustworthy when it came to rewards and punishments. His name spread far and wide, and he had defeated many great enemies time and time again. Qi Jiguang trained his troops well. The new army that he trained was known as the Qi Family Army. He created the Mandarin Duck Formation and the Chariot Battalion, which were renowned throughout the world and were known as the best weapons against the Japanese pirates. Qi Jiguang was also an outstanding weapons expert and military engineer. He modified and invented various fire weapons and improved weapons and equipment, such as the Qi family's military knife and the wolf's horn, which was specially used against the Japanese pirates. He built large and small warships and chariots, making the Ming Dynasty's waterway equipment superior to the enemy. In addition, Qi Jiguang was creative in building hollow enemy towers on the Great Wall, which could be used to attack and defend. It was a very unique military project. Ouyang Shouan did not hesitate to appoint a famous general like Qi Jiguang as the admiral of the coastal fleet. He immediately took up the post and was responsible for contending against the 3 fleets of the Yan-Huang alliance in the north. At this point, the Ming Dynasty generals occupied half of the Great Xia Navy and were the mainstay of the navy. The Great Ming Dynasty was plagued with internal and external troubles since Emperor Jiajing. It was a dynasty full of tragedies. Other than Wang Yangming, Yin Song, Hu Zongxian and Qi Jiguang all ended up in a miserable state. Not only them, but even the famous Su Jie, Zhang Jiuzheng, and Hai Rui did not have a good ending, and all of them ended up in tragedy. It could be said that it was the tragedy of an entire era. Perhaps it was fate, but these capable officials and famous generals gathered in the Great Xia dynasty and were entrusted with important tasks by Ouyang Shua. They threw themselves into a huge wave that was completely different from the Ming dynasty. Ouyang Shua looked forward to these people bringing a new atmosphere to the Great Xia dynasty. Today, the Great Xia dynasty could not follow in the footsteps of the Great Ming dynasty. Just as Ouyang Shua was receiving Yin Song and the others, there was a sudden change in the Central Plains. Chapter 985. On the second day of the first month in the 5th year of Gaia, 3 days after Gaia removed the restrictions on the capital, the hegemon Emperor Wu of Han suddenly appointed Wei Qing as a general. He led 600,000 imperial guards out of Luoyang and attacked the Central Plains. Under the command of Divine General Wei Qing, the Great Han Dynasty's imperial army was invincible. They besieged cities along the way, and many cities surrendered at the mere sight of them. Barring any mishap, the Central Plains province falling into the hands of the Great Han Dynasty was a sure thing. Even the Yin-Huang alliance did not dare to compete with the burly man. The moment the news spread, the players' hearts were filled with complicated emotions. This was the first time an NPC dynasty had displayed its might in the wilderness. Yet, the NPC dynasty's army had been able to destroy everything in its path, sending chills down their spines. With the return of all the provinces of the Central Plains to the Great Han Dynasty, a true dynasty suddenly emerged in the Central Plains. Shanghai City, Xiao Palace. The tree may desire peace, but the wind will not cease. Ouyang Shua had expected that Emperor Wu of Han would make a move, but he didn't expect him to be so decisive. The power structure of the Central Plains had been reshuffled once again, and he didn't know if this was a good or bad thing for Great Xia. How did West Chu reply? Ouyang Shua asked. Zhang Liang replied. His attitude is very friendly, and his will is very firm. Xiang Yu is indeed a tyrant. Even when he was surrounded by enemies, he did not want to ask anyone for help. Ouyang Shua was originally thinking of using the Yin-Huang alliance to pull West Chu into the alliance of mountains and seas, or even the entirety of Great Xia. Now, it seemed that he had thought too simply. His Majesty, Zhang Liang, said, "I am afraid the eastern Lu province will not be able to hold." They didn't know why, but the Yin-Huang alliance was determined to link their territories together. If the Great Xia country didn't want to start a war, they could only watch as West Chu was swallowed. That being said, we still have to do something. Ouyang Shua didn't want to see the Yin-Huang alliance smoothly expand. No matter what, he had to think of a way to stop the rise of the Yin-Huang alliance. He didn't want a giant to appear in the Central Plains. The cabinet of advisors should quickly come up with a strategy and see how we can use this opportunity to make a fuss. Ouyang Shua ordered. Zhang Liang cupped his hands and said, "Yes, sir." In the blink of an eye, it was January 5th. At 10 in the morning, the system announcement rang on time. World announcement. The second global auction has officially begun. All players worldwide who meet the requirements will automatically receive an invitation to the auction. Once you agree, you will be teleported to the Sky Auction House. In Lemuria, the funds in Ouyang Shua's hands have been used up, and the summoning of the golden platform had cost him another 1,000,000 gold coins. Even at the end of the year, when the imperial court was relatively rich, the funds available for Ouyang Shua's disposal was only 2,000,000 gold coins. In this auction, Ouyang Shua was already prepared to be a bystander. Sky City, Auction Hall. After a year had passed, the number of players qualified to appear at the auction decreased instead of increasing. It was estimated that not only China, but the entire world had experienced a major reshuffle during the 4th year of Gaia. Those who were able to stand firm, now, could already be considered elites. Ouyang Shua's appearance naturally attracted a lot of attention, but there was another person who was equally dazzling. It was the second person to establish a dynasty, Jack, who had become the hero of the Western camp. Judging from the way things were going, Jack wanted to show off his power in this auction and use it to spread the fame of the Dawson dynasty. Before the auction began, he even ran over to greet Ouyang Shaw. Congratulations. Ouyang Shaw took the initiative to extend his hand and smiled. Thank you. Jack was a little surprised. The handshake of the century between the two had been photographed, and it was expected that it would soon spread all over the world. Perhaps feeling that his momentum was suppressed by Ouyang Shaw, Jack said, unconvinced, I'm looking forward to having a face-to-face dialogue with the Great Sian Navy in the Pacific Ocean. Me too. Ouyang Shaw smiled slightly, his face still calm. Although the Great Xia dynasty and the Dawson dynasty were separated by the vast and boundless Pacific Ocean, it wasn't that the two dynasties didn't have conflicts of interest. With the opening of the trade route between the Yin-Huang alliance and North America, the Hawaiian Islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean became the focus of all parties. Whoever could control Hawaii would control the dominance of the Pacific Ocean. Although Ouyang Shaw had no intention of opening trade with North America, he was also determined to get the Hawaiian Islands. When he set off for his second voyage, he had already ordered the Ijo fleet to send an advance fleet to Hawaii to investigate. If conditions permitted, they would directly take the Hawaiian Islands. The problem was that Ouyang Shaw hadn't received any feedback from the Ijo fleet so far. Obviously, this trip didn't go smoothly, and they might have already encountered the Dawson dynasty's fleet. In the 5th year of Gaia, the two dynasties were bound to circle around the Hawaiian Islands and bow to each other. Just at this moment, the auction began. The auctioneer walked up to the stage with a smile and said, Now let's start the auction of the first item. The first beauty stepped forward and lifted the red silk cloth on the tray, revealing a talisman. Merit Talisman. After using it, you can directly obtain 300,000 merit points. The starting price is 500,000 gold coins. There is no fixed price. Please bid, everyone. The auctioneer introduced. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a burst of gas from below. Ouyang Shaw was even more dumbfounded. Gaia was up to something. Thinking of the newly updated merit system, it was obvious that they wanted to give birth to a few more dynasties in a short period of time. Di Chun, who was sitting on the left side of Ouyang Shaw, began to breathe rapidly. Ouyang Shaw understood. In this world, there was probably no one more eager to establish a dynasty than the Yin-Huang alliance. 600,000, 700,000, 1 million, 1 million. In less than 20 minutes, the merit talisman had been pushed up to 5 million gold coins. Are these people crazy? Ouyang Shaw did not understand. For 300,000 merit points, they were fighting like this. If Di Chun and the rest knew what Ouyang Shaw was thinking, they would probably curse in their hearts. Ouyang Shaw was a classic example of saying things without thinking. 300,000 merit points, after all, it was equivalent to the rewards of 3 or 4 battles. Even destroying a country might not be able to obtain so many merit points. Since the start of the game, there were no more than 200 people in the world who had actually accumulated 300,000 merit points. There was also another point. There were only 2 Lord dynasties in the world, and the third place was still vacant. Whoever obtained the merit talisman would be in the lead in this race. Just the reward from Gaia alone was worth more than 5 million gold coins. As such, Ouyang Shaw could only stare dumbfoundedly at the soaring price. It did not have any intention of stopping until it reached 250 gold coins. The lords became more cautious in their bids. Ouyang Shaw noticed that when it was 2 million gold coins, Di Chun rushed in. 3 million gold coins. At this moment, William, who had been silent, suddenly rushed in. He raised the price by 500,000 gold coins, immediately scaring off most of the competitors. William was determined to get the talisman. 2 million gold coins. It was Caesar who made the bid. He even looked at William provocatively. 4 million gold coins. William did not show any weakness. 6 million gold coins. The 2 European heroes wanted to use the merit talisman to have a good competition. Seeing this, the other lords silently backed out. Only Di Chun was expressionless. It seemed that he had not really given up. 8 million gold coins. After William made the bid, his eyes were red. Obviously, he was close to his limit. 3. 9 million gold coins. Caesar continued to follow. William gritted his teeth and said, "For million gold coins." William had decided that if Caesar continued to follow, he would give up and think of another way. The attention of the audience was focused on Caesar. Unexpectedly, this troublemaker suddenly smiled strangely and lightly said, "I give up." The audience was silent. William's expression became extremely ugly. He fiercely said, "Are you fooling me?" Caesar had an expression of, "I am indeed fooling you." He smiled and said, "I have no money, so I naturally have to give up." William could only swallow this bitter fruit. Just when everyone thought the dust had settled, suddenly there was a bid. 4. 1 million gold coins. It was Di Chun who made the bid. William did not know why, but he suddenly heaved a sigh of relief. He said, "I give up." After so many twists and turns, the merit talisman was finally won by Di Chun, the dark horse, at a record price. Ouyang Shua saw this and was deep in thought. In the 5 years of Gaia, the China region was destined to be turbulent. Perhaps because the first item was too shocking, the next few items had a mediocre response and did not cause a frenzy of bidding. It seemed a little cold. Ouyang Shua did not make a single bid from the beginning to the end. However, Jack had won 2 rare items in a row and was in the limelight. The auctioneer said with a smile, "Now, let's start the auction for the 6th item." A beautiful lady came forward and lifted the red silk cloth on the tray, revealing an ancient book. Soldier's Manual, a king-level skill exclusive to the 12th level elite soldiers. It can be taught to a group of people, and the upper limit is 5,000. The starting price is 500,000 gold coins. There's no fixed price, so please bid. The auctioneer introduced, "A friendly reminder, this soldier's manual has extremely high requirements for the cultivator's aptitude. Furthermore, it needs to be complemented by precious herbs." There was a flurry of discussion below the stage. If not for the auctioneer's reminder, everyone present would probably be eager to give it a try. With this reminder, the value of the soldier's manual dropped by more than half. Gaia's business was really honest. Ouyang Shua's eyes focused, and for the first time, he revealed an expression of interest. He subconsciously thought of the Divine Guards. As Ouyang Shua's personal guards, the Divine Guards were undoubtedly very powerful as a special type of soldier. However, they were not invincible. During this period of time, there were already ministers who suggested to expand the Divine Guards for the king's safety. Ouyang Shua did not agree. He still planned on cloning the Divine Guards to Planet Hope in the future, making them his most loyal and reliable guards. If he expanded it further, the cost of cloning would be too high and the feasibility would be greatly reduced. If he did not increase the quantity, he could only increase the quality. Ouyang Shua had once thought of giving each of the 3,000 Divine Martial Guards a set of martial arts secret manuals. However, genuine secret manuals were precious to begin with, and Ouyang Shua, whose rank was too low, didn't care for them. To gather 3,000 sets was as difficult as ascending to heaven. The appearance of this soldier's manual had undoubtedly solved Ouyang Shua's problem. As for the auctioneer's reminder, Ouyang Shua did not take it to heart. In the entire world, which territory soldiers had better aptitude than Great Xia? Chapter 986. Similar to the previous few items, the Combat Soldier Manual didn't cause a frenzy of bidding. However, Ouyang Shua didn't dare to let his guard down. 70% of the players present, be it the lords or the leaders of the guilds, were from the Silver Hand faction. Only a few of them were allies of Great Xia. If Ouyang Shua were to raise his bid rashly and expose his intentions for the Combat Soldier Manual, it would immediately attract disruptors. Others might not know, but at least that sticky Caesar would definitely step forward to cause trouble. Ouyang Shua didn't want to be a fool. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua wasn't fighting alone. He gave Feng Qiuhuang, who was sitting on the right, a subtle look. The two of them had already formed a tacit understanding. Feng Qiuhuang received the signal and nodded. When the price reached 800,000 gold coins, he decisively made his move. 1,000,000 gold coins. As expected, Caesar looked over and glanced at Ouyang Shua suspiciously. In the end, he didn't make his move. He wasn't a fool who would joke around with 1,000,000 gold coins. The others also extinguished their thoughts of bidding. As such, Ouyang Shua successfully obtained the Combat Soldier Manual at a price of 1,000,000 gold coins. Di Chun understood the act between Ouyang Shua and Feng Xiaohuang. He didn't step forward to undermine them, as that would be too ungentlemanly. Di Chun was already satisfied with obtaining the merit talisman and didn't wish to complicate matters. The following auction was uneventful until the grand finale item appeared. The auctioneer introduced Nation War Enhancement card. After using it, one can choose a 50-point buff that lasts for a week. The starting price is 500,000 gold coins. There's no fixed price, so please bid. Hiss, the players below the stage gasped. Gaia really didn't mind blowing things up. With the upcoming nation war, wouldn't auctioning such an item make people rack their brains? Just as the auctioneer finished speaking, there was a frenzy of bidding below the stage. 1,000,000 gold coins. The first to bid was Keisuke Honda from the Japanese region, doubling the price in an instant. In the 5 years of Gaia's nation war, the one with the least suspense would definitely be the battle between the China region and the Japanese region. Both sides viewed each other as mortal enemies and wanted to get rid of each other as soon as possible. The China region had Ouyang Shua's 30 honor points, so they had the upper hand in terms of buffs. To the Japanese region's players, the appearance of the Country War Enhancement card was a timely help. Keisuke Honda was determined to get the card no matter what. He wasn't a fool, but as long as he got the card, the money spent on the auction would be replenished by the adventurer players. In this regard, the Japanese players were extremely united. 1. 2,000,000 gold coins. 1. 5,000,000 gold coins. 2,000,000 gold coins. 2,200,000 gold coins. There were many lords who had the same idea as Keisuke Honda. The auction price rose like a rocket. It was crazy. Only Ouyang Shua, Jack, and a few other big shots didn't make a move. Jack did not bid because there were no strong rivals around the United States. It was not worth it for Jack to spend so much money on it. Besides, Jack's previous successful bids had basically depleted his funds. There were 2 reasons why Ouyang Shua did not bid. Firstly, he had limited funds on hand. Secondly, even if he won the bid, the players in China might not acknowledge it. Some might even think that, as a great lord, Ouyang Shua bidding was only natural. This was the nature of the Chinese. In reality, it was not uncommon to force celebrities to donate and carry out moral coercion. Ouyang Shua did not want to be taken advantage of. Moreover, even if Keisuke Honda won the card, Ouyang Shua would not fear him. 3,000,000 gold coins. 3,200,000 gold coins. 3,800,000 gold coins. For million gold coins, very quickly, the price reached a sky-high price. It was about to break the record that Di Chun had just set. At this point, the only thing that mattered was who had more money and not the value of the card itself. Are these people crazy? Feng Xiaohuang did not understand. Ouyang Shua laughed. They're not crazy. Not only will there be people willing to pay for the card, but they will also gain the upper hand in the leadership contest. They will gain both fame and fortune. Understood. Feng Xiaohuang nodded her head and gave Di Chun a meaningful look. The voting channel for the leadership contest in the China region had been opened. Ouyang Shua, Feng Xiaohuang, and the 6 from the Yanhuang Alliance were all included in the list of candidates. Currently, Ouyang Shua was in the lead with 5,000,000 votes, while Di Chun was in second place with a gap of 200,000 votes. Feng Xiaohuang, Lord Chunshin, and the others had pitifully few votes. The strategy of the Yanhuang Alliance was to concentrate the votes on Di Chun alone to compete with Ouyang Shua. With the influence of the 6 great clans, they still had a lot of rallying power. Of course, the players who were living in the territories were the majority. Those who were living in Great Xia would naturally vote for Ouyang Shua, while those who were living in the territories of the Yanhuang Alliance would vote for Di Chun. As for the real voting booths, the adventurers from the 9 great royal cities had not participated yet. They were still observing. If Great Xia really risked universal condemnation and started a civil war at the crucial moment of a national war, the players in the China region would be greatly disappointed. It was not impossible for them to vote for Di Chun. Currently, Great Xia had not sent out a clear signal of truce. If Di Chun had not spent all his money on the merit talisman, he might have also taken a gamble and used it as a weapon to win votes against Ouyang Shua. At this moment, Keisuke Honda, who had not followed up, made his move again, 5 million gold coins. This bid completely shocked the entire audience. Not to mention, in an auction, it was rare for a lord to take out 5 million gold coins in one go. It had to be said that there were many tycoons in the Japanese region. They must have exchanged a large amount of gold coins in one go to compete with the China region. Ouyang Shua glanced at Di Chun. Both of their expressions were grave. The upcoming national war doesn't seem to be as easy as we thought. Without any suspense, the National War Enhancement card was kept by Keisuke Honda. After the last item was auctioned, the auctioneer suddenly announced, "Since the world system is already very mature, the god has decided that this will be the last official auction. Thank you for your participation." Everyone could not react for a moment, and they all felt a sense of loss. Gaia's products are definitely the best. No one expected that such an auction tradition would come to an end just like that. Ouyang Shua had some guesses about the auction. Gaia was definitely not a person who gave away money. Every move they made had a deeper meaning behind it, especially the last two global auctions. Every auction had reaped tens of millions of gold coins. The funds that had surged due to the exchange in the real world were quietly reclaimed by Gaia and written off. This ensured that the supply of gold coins in the game world was balanced, and not only did it increase inflation. Apart from that, Ouyang Shua also speculated that Gaia was using virtual game items to deplete the achievement points of the elites, especially the members of the Silver Hand. Was there a shadow of the academies behind Gaia's actions? Ouyang Shua did not know. What was Gaia's intention behind suddenly canceling the official auction? The more he thought about it, the more Ouyang Shua felt that his vision was shrouded by a layer of fog. While he was in a daze, Ouyang Shua did not realize that the auction had already ended. Everyone else was teleported back, except for him, who was teleported to a small courtyard in the Sky City. "My young friend, we finally meet." Ouyang Shua was instantly jolted awake. He saw that he was in a small garden, and standing in front of him was a white-haired old man who was greeting him in a friendly manner. "Lord President." Ouyang Shua recognized the old man immediately. The Federation president smiled. "Sit down and talk. If you don't mind, you can call me Old Chun." That's right. The Federation president was a Chinese of noble birth. He led the Federation with China's unique political wisdom. He was truly an impressive figure. If it was in his previous life, or when Ouyang Shua had just been reborn, he would be extremely reserved when he saw this famous leader with his own eyes. But now, Ouyang Shua only froze for a moment before returning to normal. He sat down calmly. When Old Chun saw this, his eyes flashed with a hint of appreciation. As the Great Xia grew stronger, Old Chun was happy, but at the same time, he felt uneasy. Therefore, he used the auction as an opportunity to facilitate his meeting with Ouyang Shua. "Come, this is the tea made from the tea tree that I personally planted. Have a taste." Ouyang Shua nodded, picked up the teacup, and slowly took a sip. The tea was cool and refreshing, making people feel relaxed and happy. He said with a smile, "Good tea." Old Chun smiled, very happy. Ouyang Shua took the opportunity to say, "I haven't thanked Old Chun for last time." Ouyang Shua was referring to the last time he asked Old Chun to investigate and verify the governor of Auckland, Johnson. "It's nothing." Ouyang Shua remained calm and chatted with Old Chun. He wasn't anxious at all, and he didn't take the initiative to ask Old Chun why he sent him here. In this way, the two foxes, one old and one young, chatted for more than half an hour, but they still didn't get to the point. This time, Old Chun finally couldn't sit still. The Sky City wasn't absolutely private. If Ouyang Shua stayed for a long time, it would be easy for him to be exposed. If the old guys from the Silver Hands knew about it, it would be a big deal. At present, the academics were still unwilling to go to war with the Silver Hands. Old Chen said unwillingly, "Little friend, aren't you curious why I called you here?" If Old Chen is willing to say, I will say it even if I don't ask. If Old Chen is unwilling to say, it's useless to ask. Old Chen was completely at his wit's end with Ouyang Shua. He had never seen a young man who could be as calm as Ouyang Shua. He was simply an old fox at the same level as him. Games really temper people. Old Chen sighed. At this point, Old Chen didn't beat around the bush and directly said, "This time, I invited you here to meet and formally get to know you." Ouyang Shua nodded. Old Chen is a leader that I respect very much. To be recognized by Old Chen is my honor. This was not Ouyang Shua's flattering words, but the truth. Old Chen didn't know how many flattering words he had heard in his life, but it happened to come from Ouyang Shua's mouth, which made him feel comforted. In addition to meeting, the most important thing is to talk to you about the Yan-Huang alliance. Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed, knowing that the show had just begun. Chapter 987. Old Chen said, "You might not know, but the Silver Hand has 5 core members, and Di Chen's grandfather is the second most important person." Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed, and he said slowly, "What do you mean, Old Chen?" There's an old saying in China, "Hit the snake where it hurts." When facing a behemoth like the Silver Hand, it's best not to touch their bottom line unless you are completely confident of destroying them. Ouyang Shua was enlightened, and he finally understood the real intention of Old Chen calling him over. At this moment, not only the players in the China region, even the academics were filled with doubts. They did not know if Great Xia would initiate a civil war with the Yan-Huang alliance in the 5 years of Gaia. Old Chen was here to mediate. Di Chen, or rather Handan City, which Di Chen represented, was one of the bottom lines of the Silver Hand. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "I understand what you mean, Old Chen." Although Great Xia had already decided not to attack the Yan-Huang alliance, Ouyang Shua did not make it clear. Instead, he gave Old Chen the illusion that Great Xia did not attack because of him. Unknowingly, Ouyang Shua had returned the favor. "You're worth teaching." Sure enough, Old Chen smiled and finally made up his mind. He took out a piece of paper and handed it over. Ouyang Shua took a look, and it was a list of lords from all over the world. The name of Battle Wolf was impressively on the list. These are all ambitious people in the Federation. Just like you, they have long been dissatisfied with the tyrannical behavior of the Silver Hand. I think you should be able to become friends. Everyone has a common enemy, and Great Xia can rest assured to cooperate with them in global trade and strategy. It's also a win-win situation. Old Chen explained. Ouyang Shua understood. Old Chen had put it beautifully, but it was actually a list of the academics members. He had only taken a quick look, but his heart was already in turmoil. Among the top 100 lords in the world, the list actually accounted for 30% of them. The academics seemed to be inconspicuous, but in fact, like the Silver Hand, they had already extended their tentacles to every corner of the world, including the Silver Hand. There were chess pieces of the academics within the Silver Hand. Ouyang Shua was almost certain that this list was only the tip of the iceberg. To be able to contend with the Silver Hand for so long, the academics were really not to be trifled with. Ouyang Shua had to admit that he had underestimated the people of the world. On the list, other than the deeply hidden Battle Wolf, there were also 3 feudal lords in the China region, including Qin Fun, who had already fallen under the butcher knife of Great Xia. One of them even held the position of a prefectural governor in Great Xia. At this moment, Elder Chen revealed this name list. Firstly, it was to express his goodwill to Ouyang Shua. Secondly, it was also to display his strength. He wanted to destroy Ouyang Shua's arrogance and bring Great Xia into the faction of the academics. Great Xia likes a win-win situation. Ouyang Shua gave Elder Chen such an answer. His meaning was very clear. Great Xia could cooperate with the academies, but they wouldn't submit to them and be at their beck and call. Old Man Chen nodded his head helplessly. When Xia Kingdom was founded, he had already vaguely predicted today's situation. Xia Kingdom had already spread its wings and soared. How could this young man in front of him be willing to be inferior to others? For this reason, Old Man Shun even wanted to use supporting Ouyang Shuo as the next leader of the faction as a bargaining chip to completely bring Great Xia into the faction of the academics. However, before he could propose this to Ouyang Shuo, he was vetoed within the faction. The internal structure of the faction was also complicated, and it wasn't a monolithic block. The big shots instinctively rejected Ouyang Shuo, who was a pure grassroots, and called him a wild boar that had barged into a grand view garden. To put it bluntly, they felt that Ouyang Shuo was a barbarian who relied on his gaming talent and heaven-defying luck to destroy the old order. Hence, how could they take a liking to Ouyang Shuo? Furthermore, the interests involved in the faction leader were extremely deep. It was related to the cake of many people. So how could they tolerate an outsider getting involved? Even Old Man Shun was powerless to quell this conflict. In the end, he could only give up. I can only take one step at a time. Old Man Shun sighed in his heart. Subsequently, the two of them chatted for another half an hour before Ouyang Shuo bade farewell and left. Before leaving, Old Man Shun exhorted one last time. Little friend, remember this sentence. A fortress will always collapse from the inside first. You have to be patient. Ouyang Shuo's figure paused for a moment before he turned around and bowed. I've learned something. Ouyang Shuo was extremely respectful towards Old Man Shun. In just a short hour of conversation, Ouyang Shuo deeply felt the unfathomable wisdom of this old man. However, they weren't individuals after all. They each represented a group, and there was an irreconcilable conflict between them that couldn't be swayed by personal feelings. Regarding this, Ouyang Shuo was helpless. With a flash of white light, Ouyang Shuo was teleported back to the summer palace by Gaia. Old Man Shun looked at the gradually dissipating white light and mumbled, I can't see through this kid. In the corner of the courtyard, Gaia suddenly appeared and silently watched this scene. He didn't say a word from the beginning to the end. Unbeknownst to everyone, when Gaia saw the white light that Ouyang Shuo left, a trace of emotion flashed in his eyes for the first time. Interstellar migration was a disaster for the Federation, but it was an opportunity for Gaia. Using the migration, Gaia not only controlled the operation of the entire fleet, but it also controlled the entire game world. Every action of 1 billion players could be seen by Gaia. Such a huge amount of information allowed Gaia's intelligence to usher in another leap. However, at this time, Gaia had no one to monitor it. No one knew to what extent this top-notch artificial intelligence had evolved. Unknowingly, Gaia itself had become the biggest variable in the imperial study of the Summer Palace. After returning, Ouyang Shuo took out the combat manual and looked at its attributes. Name, Combat Manual, King Level Technique, Level 1/Level 9 Attributes. Every increase in level, Bone Root +1, Perception +1, Martial Force +2 characteristics, Unparalleled Fighting Spirit, instantly increases health and blood, doubles combat power, lasts for 1 hour, characteristics, Group Teaching, 0/5000, Cultivation Requirements, Rank 12 Veteran Soldier, Grade A Aptitude. Remarks. This is a rare group cultivation technique, tailor-made for warriors on the battlefield. Paired with the Qi and Blood Pill, one can achieve twice the result with half the effort. The 2 cultivation requirements of the combat manual were met by the 3,000 Divine Guards. Firstly, the Divine Guards were the elites of the Great Xia army, and their basic aptitudes were Grade B and above. Some time ago, Ouyang Shuo and his party inadvertently obtained the 10,000-year stalactite in the cave of the Sacred Mountain. After the Divine Guards consumed it, their strength soared, and a few of them with Grade B aptitude broke through their bottlenecks and advanced further. Not to mention the Divine Guards. Ouyang Shuo's own cultivation of the Golden Court interior scripture broke through to the 2nd level in one fell swoop under the stimulation of the 10,000-year stalactite. He successfully opened up his purple mansion, and his cultivation was already unfathomable. The current Ouyang Shuo could already fight Su Chu to a draw. At the back of the secret manual, there was a recipe for refining the Qi and Blood Pill. There were no less than 5 types of precious medicinal herbs, such as ginseng, lingzhi, and Polygonum multiflorum. The other supplementary medicinal herbs were also of high quality. The problem was, according to the combat manual, in order to achieve the best results for cultivation, it was best for every practitioner to consume 1 qi and blood pill every month for at least 3 years. If 3,000 divine guards were to cultivate together, the amount of qi and blood pills needed would be massive. Even so, Ouyang Shua did not hesitate at all. He immediately called over the divine guards General Su Chu and the imperial physician Zhang Zhongjing. Ouyang Shua passed the war weapon scripture to Su Chu, who was responsible for teaching this cultivation technique to the divine martial guards and supervising their cultivation at the same time. The recipe for the qi and blood pill was given to Zhang Zhongjing. The Imperial Physician Academy would be responsible for refining the qi and blood pills for the divine guards. For this, Ouyang Shua allocated the remaining 1 million gold coins to the Imperial Physician Academy to purchase medicinal herbs. In other words, in order to further temper the divine guards, Ouyang Shua threw in 2 million gold coins at once. For this, Ouyang Shua had no choice but to delay the use of the contract beast wishing stone. Such a large sum moved Su Chu. He solemnly said, "Please rest assured, Your Majesty. I will train them hard and let the divine guards reach another level." Ouyang Shua reminded, "You can train them, but don't be too hasty." Understood. After sending off Su Chu and Zhang Zhongjing, Ouyang Shua immediately called over Zhang Liang. Ouyang Shua told him about the meeting with the Federation president in detail and asked, "Zifang, how do you think we should deal with the relationship with the academics?" Zhang Liang was slightly excited. This was the first time he came into contact with such a high-level secret. Only in Great Xia, a dynasty that treated NPCs equally, could Zhang Liang be put in an important position. Rosy Cloud City was too small. Even if Zhang Liang went to the Yanhuang Alliance, he would still not be able to come into contact with such a high-level secret. That was the exclusive right of his family's higher-ups. Your Majesty's handling of the matter is not inappropriate. Zhang Liang thought for a moment and continued, "Cooperating with the academics is only a temporary measure. If Your Majesty really wants to establish a foothold, you need to remember one thing. When cooperating with the academics to suppress the Silver Hand, you need to pay attention to propriety and cleverly balance the power of both sides." Ouyang Shua raised his eyebrows. "Zifang means that we can't let one side be too strong or too weak, but to maintain a balance and then profit from it." Exactly. At present, our strength is still unable to compete with any of them. Once one of them collapses, then the victorious side will immediately point the spear at us. Is it an anomaly? Ouyang Shua had a complicated expression. Whether it was justice or evil, they would not tolerate an anomaly to exist in the world for a long time, because an anomaly often meant a drastic change in the world. It was very likely to overturn the foundation of the old forces in one fell swoop and create a new world. Perhaps in the eyes of the academics, Great Xia was still just a chess piece. All right, Ouyang Shua suddenly smiled. Since we were using each other, it depends on whose chess skill is better. Who is the chess piece and who is the chess player? It is still unknown. Zhang Liang saw this and could not hide the shock and excitement in his eyes. Ouyang Shua looked deeply at Zhang Liang and asked, "Zifang, besides maintaining the balance, is there any fundamental strategy that can protect the foundation of Great Xia and not be influenced by others?" Chapter 988. Zhang Liang replied, "The fundamental solution is to find like-minded people to form the third pole of the world with Great Xia. This way we can compete with the Silver Hand and the academics. If you didn't want to be manipulated, you had to jump out of the rules set by others." Okay. Ouyang Shua was enlightened. He handed the list to Zhang Liang and said, "After you go down, study the list and see how we can make use of it." Understood. Zhang Liang nodded solemnly. The opportunity for the Secretariat to show its power had finally arrived. In the next few days, the world was calm. On the 10th of January in the 5th year of Gaia, Gan Ning led the royal fleet back to the North Seaport. Along with the fleet was the first submarine of the Xia Navy, the Black Shark. The next morning, Great Xia finally made a move. On this day, Navy Commander-in-Chief Zheng He, Minister of the Navy and Headmaster of the Navy Li Hongzhang, Chief of Staff of the Navy Command Lu Su, Admiral Gan Ning of the Royal Fleet, Admiral Zhou Yu of the Southern Border Fleet, Admiral Yu Daiyo of the Cliff Mountain Fleet, Admiral Shi Lang of the Izhou Fleet, Admiral Yin Hua of the Indian Ocean Fleet, Admiral Alvaro of the Atlantic Fleet, and Admiral Qi Jiguang of the Coastal Fleet. After making the strategic choice of focusing on external affairs and not internal affairs, the first thing Ouyang Shua had to do was to completely remodel the Navy, which was a key military force. He had to formulate a development plan for the Navy for the next 3 years in order to coordinate with the dynasty's overseas strategy. Among the 7 major fleets, the Royal Fleet was the most special. The Coastal Fleet was formed the latest and only had 2 fleets that weren't fully staffed. The other 5 fleets were fully staffed. The first step to remodel the Navy was to adjust its structure. The biggest weakness of the Xia Navy was that it focused on coastal waters and didn't care about the ocean. The Royal Fleet aside, the Southern Fleet, Cliff Mountain Fleet, Izhou Fleet, and the Coastal Fleet were all coastal fleets. This might not have been a big deal in the past, but now that the dynasty's strategic focus had shifted and the Yin-Huang alliance couldn't pose a fatal threat to Great Xia, it was redundant to deploy so many fleets in the coastal waters. Not only would it waste a lot of resources, but it would also be a huge burden on the military budget. The first adjustment was the Southern Fleet. The Southern Border Fleet was formerly known as the North Gulf Fleet, which was also the first naval fleet of Great Xia. After restructuring, it entered the mainland and was headquartered at Lake Poyang in the Jiangchuan province. Ouyang Shua's original intention was to have the Southern Border Fleet cooperate with the army. As the situation in the world gradually stabilized, there was no longer a need to deploy such a large fleet inland, and it could be appropriately reduced. It just so happened that the coastal fleet wasn't full yet, so Ouyang Shua immediately decided to transfer the 3rd, 4th, and 5th formations of the Southern Border Fleet to the Coastal Fleet. The future Southern Border Fleet would only retain the configuration of 2 formations. The Coastal Fleet had to fight against the Yin-Huang alliance, his Handan Fleet, as well as the Haizhou Fleet in the Northern Sea region. In order to ensure the dynasty's influence in the Northern Sea region, it was important for them to be at full strength as soon as possible. This was one of the reasons. The Coastal Fleet was close to Japan and would definitely play an important role in the nation war. After Qi Jiguang, a famous anti-Japanese general, took office, the Coastal Fleet should be fully staffed. In addition to the reduction of troops, the Southern Border Fleet was a pure river navy, so it was not appropriate to include it in the Navy establishment. With this adjustment, the Southern Frontier Fleet was once again renamed as the Southern Frontier Navy, officially withdrawing from the Navy ranks and being placed under the leadership of the Privy Council and the Grand Council, with the same treatment as the Army. At the same time, the Fleet Admiral also made adjustments. Gan Ning was relieved of his duties as the Admiral of the Royal Navy and transferred to the Southern Navy. Zhou Yu was relieved of his duties as the Admiral of the Southern Frontier Navy. This meant that Gan Ning and Zhou Yu had completed swap. After the Southern Frontier Navy was reduced, its strategic position plummeted. Naturally, Ouyang Shu wouldn't let a famous general like Zhou Yu be buried. It was only natural that he would be transferred to the Royal Navy. Moreover, choosing Gan Ning as the Admiral of the Royal Navy was a stopgap measure. The Izhou Fleet was also adjusted. The Izhou Fleet was renamed the Pacific Fleet, becoming the 3rd ocean-going fleet of the Great Xia Navy. This way, apart from the Arctic Ocean, the Great Xia would have an exclusive ocean-going fleet stationed in each of the 4 great oceans. The global layout was thus implemented. After the adjustment, the jurisdiction of the other 5 fleets became clear, except for the Royal Navy. The Cliff Mountain Fleet commanded by Yu Daiyo mainly governed the South Sea, while the Coastal Fleet commanded by Qi Jiguang governed the Yellow Sea and East Sea. The 2 coastal fleets jointly guarded the Great Xia coastline and protected the dynasty's offshore interests. Qi Jiguang and Yu Daiyo were old partners against the Japanese, one in the south and the other in the north. The Atlantic Fleet, commanded by the famous Spanish General Alvaro, was headquartered in Morocco. Its jurisdiction included the Mediterranean Sea, the west coast of the African continent, and the east coast of the American continent. The Mediterranean Sea alone was enough to give the Great Sia a headache. With the participation of the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and the United States, the Atlantic Fleet would be in the most difficult situation among the six fleets. Fortunately, Alvaro, the Spanish god of war, was in charge, which made Ouyang Shua feel more at ease. The Indian Ocean Fleet, commanded by the Devil of Fireworks, was headquartered in Los Leones. Its jurisdiction included parts of the ASEAN region, the east coast of the African continent, and Oceania, where Australia and New Zealand were located. Therefore, the Atlantic Fleet would withdraw from the Gulf of Aden and hand over the defensive area to the Indian Ocean Fleet. In addition to guarding the Strait of Malacca, Somaliland, and other strategic locations, the Indian Ocean Fleet would inevitably collide with the Indian Fleet in the future to fight for control of the Indian Ocean. The Devil of Fireworks, a legendary admiral who had grown up, would also have a broader platform. Finally, the Pacific Fleet, commanded by Shi Lang, was still headquartered in Ijo County. In the future, Ouyang Shua hoped that the Pacific Fleet could take over the Hawaiian Islands as a springboard. It would be best if they could also establish a naval base in the American continent and complete the layout of the Pacific Ocean. The enemies of the Pacific Fleet, aside from the Japanese in the north, were primarily the Dawson dynasty. In addition, they had the heavy responsibility of opening up trade routes between the Dawson dynasty and South America. Clearly defining the jurisdiction of the five fleets was only the first step. The key was to formulate different weapons and equipment development plans based on the differences between the inshore and the long-distance fleets. With the application of magic-powered submarine manufacturing technology, the Great Sia Navy's equipment system, which included warships, auxiliary ships, cannons, guns, submarines, carrier-based aircraft, mines, and so on, had been basically perfected. However, the new round of system updates, Gaia had greatly slowed down the production of weapons and equipment. Even with the Great Sia's advanced shipbuilding and military manufacturing industry, they had to make a choice. Ouyang Shua's strategy was very simple. It was to prioritize equipping the three long-distance fleets and change their equipment. This time, it was not as simple as changing their main battleships. Within 3 years, the three long-distance fleets will undergo a transformation and complete the conversion from cold weapons to firearms. All the soldiers on the ships will be changed to gunners or cannoneers. There will not be a single pure swordsman or archer. This was how Ouyang Shua defined this extraordinary change of equipment. The production of guns was still a difficult problem, and large-scale production was even more difficult. According to preliminary estimates, to complete this major change of equipment, they would need to build at least 500 Z-1 warships, 30,000 Z-1 cannons, 20,000 Z-2 cannons, and 200,000 muskets. For the Great Sia, whose industry was still underdeveloped, this was an unprecedented order. By ending the tradition of auctions, Gaia had sent a clear signal. Gaia would no longer use the auction to throw out equipment manufacturing manuals that exceeded the current technology tree. The game world's technology tree would also no longer make any historical breakthroughs. As for the Navy, sail-powered warships would remain the mainstream warships of the navies for a long period of time. Even if someone were to develop an ironclad warship driven by a steam engine, it would be an experimental one. It would be impossible for it to be installed on a large scale. Ignoring everything else, just the manufacturing speed would not allow for large-scale production. It was because of this strategic judgment that Ouyang Shua decided to give the three long-distance fleets a large-scale change of equipment. Otherwise, it would be terrible if Gaia were to introduce ironclad warships after they had gone through so much trouble to upgrade the Z-1 warships. Even so, there was still some room for flexibility in this change of equipment. It was not a one-off change. The specific change plan was naturally formulated by the military department in cooperation with the Naval Command. There was no need for Ouyang Shua to worry. Adjusting the structure delineating the jurisdiction, and formulating a fleet change plan. With these 3 steps, the construction of the Great Xia Navy would enter the right track and become more scientific and reasonable. But this was not enough. After delineating the jurisdiction, the first problem for the long-distance fleets was how to build 3 to 5 naval bases at key locations in the ocean to control the sea. It would be best if there were ready-made ports. If there weren't, they could either rent a port or directly attack the country where the port was located. The choice was a big problem. This was a systematic project. It required the cooperation of the fleet, the Naval Command, and the Grand Council to come up with a detailed expansion plan and timetable. This also involved the Black Snake Guard's intelligence network, the Cabinet of Advisors, and the deployment of the cabinet. The list provided by Old Shun could also play a role in this. It was intricate and complicated. Ouyang Shuo was not a harsh boss. The order he gave to the Navy commanders of the 3 long-distance fleets was to complete the compilation of the naval base construction plan before the Lantern Festival. As for how to coordinate the various departments, that was the job of the 3 commanders. The fleet change plan also involved the change of the arms, which in turn involved the restructuring of the entire fleet. It was impossible to use the structure of the cold weapons era to directly apply it to the hot weapons era. The restructuring of the organization and the tactical system had to be adjusted accordingly. The problem was, in the face of such a big adjustment, would the Navy officers and men be able to adapt to it? Would they need to organize formal training? This involved another part of the restructuring of the Navy, the construction of the Naval School. The Navy Minister and the principal of the Naval School, Li Hongzhang, would take this opportunity to gradually move to the forefront. Chapter 989. Li Hongzhang had been in charge of the construction of the Naval Academy for 2 months. Beihai City had specially allocated a plot of land for the construction of the academy, but only the framework had been built. Coupled with the system update, the construction progress will be further slowed down. This was only a problem with the hardware. What was more troublesome was the allocation of teachers. China's ancient navy was in short supply, and there was little research on naval warfare. To find a group of qualified instructors was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Unfortunately, the Naval Academy was the core of the reconstruction of the Navy, and it was related to the improvement of the Navy's overall combat quality. Ouyang Shuo gathered all the admirals for a discussion to get them to recommend some talented people to teach at the Naval Academy. Since the establishment of Great Xia's Navy, they had experienced no less than 100 naval battles. On the battlefield, they had honed a group of outstanding young Navy generals with ideas and became the best candidates for instructors at the Naval Academy. Don't be reluctant to let them go. If you send an instructor to the Naval Academy today, the Naval Academy will be able to send 10 to 100 outstanding students to the fleet tomorrow, Ouyang Shuo said to Shi Lang and the other admirals. Since the king had already instructed them, these admirals could only reluctantly part with their treasures. Otherwise, Li Hongzhang, who had just arrived and held the title of Minister of the Navy, wouldn't be able to deal with these admirals. In addition to selecting instructors within the fleet, Ouyang Shuo also entrusted the Black Snake Guards, the Chamberlain of Dependencies, the 3 Royal Merchants, and other organizations to take advantage of the overseas operations to poach people from Western countries. With a large sum of money and the prestige of Great Xia, it was still possible to recruit some foreign elites. Great Xia's ability to place a foreign general like Alvaro in a key position like the Atlantic Fleet Admiral was enough to dispel the doubts of those Western generals. Ouyang Shuo even secretly instructed the Black Snake, even if you have to tie them up and bring them to Great Xia. As long as they came, there was no need to be afraid of not yielding. For the construction of the Naval Academy, Ouyang Shuo had put in a lot of effort. This was something that couldn't be helped. The foundation of China's ancient navy was too weak, and Great Xia was destined to directly compete with the other naval powers. In order to shorten the gap, Ouyang Shuo could only do this. In the next few days, the 10 admirals gathered around the construction of the naval base, the preparation of the Naval Academy, the adjustment of the naval establishment, and other major issues. They worked together to discuss the development of the navy. It led to the beginning of the Tang dynasty's separatist regime. There were even people who joked that this was the turning point of the central dynasty, turning from strong to weak against the northern tribes. The Ungshi Rebellion? That's interesting. Ouyang Shua smiled. Chapter 990. The biggest difference between the Ensure Rebellion and the previous 7 battles was that this was an internal rebellion initiated by the generals at the border, not a battle between 2 major powers. Speaking of this battle, we have to briefly talk about the military governor system of the Tang dynasty. Emperor Taizong and Emperor Gaozong repeatedly expanded their territory and pacified the Liaodong, Eastern Turkic, Western Turkic, and Tuyuhan regions, making the Tang dynasty an extremely vast empire. In order to strengthen the central government's control over the border, consolidate the defense, and govern the foreign tribes, Emperor Xuanzong set up 10 military towns at the border in the 10th year of the Kaiyuan era, which were managed by 9 military governors and 1 military governor. What was a military governor? According to the book of the New Tang dynasty, the 40th Army, it has its own land, its own people, its own armors, and its own taxes. Because of this, the military governors dominated a region and became a worry for the Tang imperial family. Emperor Xuanzong abolished the military system, making the Tang dynasty more powerful on the outside and weaker on the inside. At that time, there were 500,000 soldiers at the border, but the imperial family had less than 80,000 soldiers. The local military governors were already a threat to the imperial family. Enlushan alone was the military governor of Pinglu, military governor of Fanyang, and military governor of Hedong. He had 150,000 soldiers. To an emperor, whether an official wanted to rebel or not did not depend on whether the official had the intention to rebel or not, but whether the official had the ability to rebel or not. Without a doubt, Enlushan had the ability. Many officials in the imperial family submitted memorials to Emperor Xuanzong, saying that Enlushan might rebel, but Emperor Xuanzong did not listen. The most resolute one was the Prime Minister, Yang Guozhong, the brother of Yang Guofei. Yang Guozhong and Enlushan had been enemies for a long time, but Emperor Xuanzong did not interfere. Enlushan also had other ambitions and had a large military force, so he rebelled in the name of fighting against Yang Guofei. Thus, the 8-year rebellion began. When the war ended, there was no real winner. Prime Minister Yang Guozhong was killed by the angry soldiers in the Maowei in mutiny. Yang Guofei was forced to commit suicide, and Emperor Xuanzong parted ways with Crown Prince Li Hong. In the end, he was forced to abdicate and become the retired emperor. The rebels did not have a good ending either. Ironically, the 2 rebel leaders did not die on the battlefield, but were killed by their sons. Enlushan was killed by his son Qingxiu, and Shi Siming was killed by his son Shi Chaoi. Personal fates were secondary. More importantly, the Enlushan rebellion directly affected the Tang dynasty's future and indirectly affected the fate of the entire Chinese nation. The Ensure rebellion destroyed the foundation of the Tang Empire's rule, weakened the centralized feudal power, and created the necessary conditions for the feudal separatist regime. The Tang Empire fell from prosperity to decline, never to rise again. During the 5 dynasties and 10 mutiny, about the emperor of the Tang dynasty and the Song dynasty, Emperor Zhao Kuangyin destroyed the dynasty. During the period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, there were cases of military dictatorship, usurpation, and mutiny of soldiers and generals, such as Guo Wei, the founder of the later Zhou dynasty, and Zhao Kuangyin, the founder of the Song dynasty, took advantage of the Qinxiao mutiny, wearing the yellow robe to gain power. In order to prevent this kind of thing from happening again, Zhao Kuangyin implemented the policy of emphasizing culture and despising military. He encouraged scholars to become generals and strictly prohibited martial artists from interfering in politics. He also used the opportunity of drinking and drinking to inform the generals to resign. Although Zhao Kuangyin's policy of emphasizing culture and despising military succeeded in weakening the local power and prolonging the reign of the Song dynasty, it caused the Song dynasty and the Song dynasty to be poor and weak. The Song dynasty was in dire financial straits, and the region was in dire straits. Throughout the Song dynasty, this situation did not change much. After the Tang dynasty, it became an extravagant hope for the generals to become ministers, and it became a tradition for the civil officials to control the generals. Some people joked that the Han nation was castrated, and they would no longer have the glory of the Han and Tang dynasties. Shanghai City, Xia Palace. As soon as the system announcement ended, Feng Qiuhuang came to Shanghai City to discuss the war with Ouyang Shua. Right now, there were only the two of them left in the Shanghai alliance. There were many civil and military officials from the Tang dynasty and the Great Xia dynasty. Therefore, no matter what Di Chun and the rest chose, Ouyang Shua would still choose the Tang dynasty's side. If the Yin Huang alliance also chose the Tang dynasty's side, then there would be no suspense in this war. However, with the arrogance of Di Chun and the rest, they would probably want to fight with Ouyang Shua on the battlefield. One of the reasons was that the Yin Huang alliance had the absolute advantage in terms of military strength. Although Ouyang Shua was a duke, he could only command 100,000 soldiers. Feng Qiuhuang was a first-grade duke and could command 50,000 soldiers. In total, it would be 150,000 soldiers. The Yin Huang alliance had 6 first-grade dukes and could command 300,000 soldiers. This was exactly twice the number of the Shanghai alliance. The soldiers on the battlefield could be revived with battle contribution points. Therefore, Di Chun and the rest had nothing to worry about. Ouyang Shua was happy to see this happen. Isn't it too boring if we're all in harmony? Ouyang Shua said to Feng Qiuhuang. Feng Qiuhuang nodded. She was also a person who liked to fight. Ouyang Shua continued. This war is a great opportunity for fallen Phoenix City to subdue their generals. You have to make good use of it. Ouyang Shua's words meant that he was voluntarily giving up his authority to subdue the Tang dynasty's generals. Feng Qiuhuang had Old K, Wang Xiai, and Zhou Bo, 3 generals under her. This was already good enough. The only thing she lacked was a commander-level general. The Tang dynasty's famous General Guizi was undoubtedly a suitable candidate. Feng Qiuhuang smiled brightly. Then it would be impolite of me to refuse. There was no need for formalities between the two of them. Jingdu Province, Handan City. Di Chun and the rest gathered together to discuss the war. The old fox has already said that he will choose the Tang dynasty's side. What does everyone think? Di Chun asked. Lord Chun Shun sneered. He really knows how to take advantage of the situation. By choosing the Tang dynasty's side, isn't it obvious that he wants to defeat us again? You can't say that. War Wolf disagreed. With Tang Xuanzong's stupidity, choosing the Tang dynasty's side may not be beneficial. Furthermore, the Ungshi rebellion lasted 8 years in history. No one knows when Gaia will extrapolate the war to. There are many variables. That's right. Xiongba nodded. With Gaia's nature, they will not be biased towards any side. It's all the same no matter which side we choose. The key is how we operate. Seeing that everyone had expressed their opinions, Di Chun smiled and said, What everyone means is to fight again. Fight, Xiongba said concisely. That's right. We can't be afraid. If we don't win once, I won't be satisfied. Military Kill Ripper took it to heart. Lord Chunshin did not object. He smiled and said, That's fine. We've already fought 7 times. One more time won't make a difference. According to the speculations of the family's experts who specialize in the rules of war, the next few wars in the China region are likely to be single-faction wars. We won't have many chances to wrestle with the old fox anymore. Di Chun said heroically, All right, then it's decided. Let's go all out and fight again. Yin Huang Alliance and Shanghai Alliance once again began their confrontation. On the 15th of January in the 5th year of Gaia, 9 a.m., the system announcement rang. System announcement. In the year 755, military governor in Lushan and Siming rebelled against the Tang Empire in the name of crusading against Yang Guozhong. In the end, they were suppressed by the Tang Empire. The Eighth Epic War. The Insha Rebellion has officially begun. Checking the conditions for participating in the war, selecting the participating troops, choosing the faction. Ouyang Shua chose 2 Mountain Barbarian Heavy Infantry Divisions from the 1st Legion of the Imperial Guards, the 2nd Legion of the Imperial Guards, and the 3,000 Divine Martial Guards to form an army of 100,000. Since the Tang Empire did not lack famous generals, Ouyang Shua did not bring Huitsubing on this trip. System announcement. Begin teleportation. After a brief moment of dizziness, Ouyang Shua and his party appeared on the battlefield. System announcement. Welcome to the main camp of the Tang Empire. Chang'an. Ouyang Shua was stunned. This meant that Chang had not been conquered by the rebel army yet. According to history, Emperor Xuanzong should not have brought his ministers and concubines to take refuge in Shu. The famous Maoyan mutiny had not happened. Then, has Tong Pass already fallen? Ouyang Shua was most concerned about this. Tong Pass was the last line of defense for Chang'an. If it fell, then there was no point in staying in Chang'an. Chapter 991. On the 9th day of the 11th month in the 14th year of Tianbao, and Lu Shan, who was also the military governor of Fanyang, Pinglu, and Hudong, mobilized his Tang army, as well as the Tongluo, Shi, Khitan, and Sherwei army, a total of 250,000 men. They used the excuse of worrying about the country and attacking Yang Guozhong as an excuse. And Lu Shan rode on the iron palanquin. His elite infantry and cavalry troops stirred up a cloud of dust for thousands of miles. Their clamor shook the earth. The people had not seen war for generations and were shocked when they heard that Fanyang was mobilized. Hebei was under Lu Shan's jurisdiction. Wherever the rebels passed, the local magistrates either opened their gates to welcome the rebels, abandoned their cities, or were captured and killed by the rebels. Soon, the rebels took control of Hebei. On the 15th day of the 11th month, Emperor Xuanzong appointed the military governor of Anxi, Feng Changqing, as the military governor of Fanyang and Pinglu to defend Luoyang. He then appointed Prince Rong Liwan as the marshal and Right Great General Go Xianji as the deputy marshal. At the same time, he sent by Sikhen to recruit troops to defend Luoyang. Most of the Tang elite troops had not returned. Feng Changqing and Go Xianji recruited troops in Chang and in Luoyang. They were all commoners who lacked battle experience and had not undergone training. Although Lu Shan's army encountered some obstacles, they still managed to enter Luoyang on the 12th day of the 12th month. Feng Changqing and Go Xianji, who had retreated to Tong Pass, defended the pass and did not come out. Unfortunately, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang believed the false accusation of a eunuch in charge of supervising the army and executed Feng Changqing and Go Xianji for the crime of losing discipline and losing one's teacher. On the first day of the first month of the 15th year of Tianbao, Lu Shan proclaimed himself the emperor of the Great Yin in Luoyang. After killing Feng Changqing and Go Xianji, Emperor Xuanzong appointed the military governor of Longyu, Geshu Han, as the deputy marshal and ordered him to lead 200,000 troops to defend Tong Pass. Tong Pass was a strategic location, easy to defend and difficult to attack. After Geshu Han entered Tong Pass, he immediately fortified the city and built high walls. In the first month of the 15th year of Tianbao, Lu Shan ordered his son and Qingshu to attack Tong Pass, but was repelled by Geshu Han. The main force of An's army was blocked at Tong Pass for several months and could not advance westward. Seeing that attacking by force was not working, Lu Shan ordered Cui Qianyu to station the old, weak, and sick soldiers in Shan Commandery and hide the elite troops to lure Geshu Han into battle. In the 5th month, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang received news that the rebel General Cui Qianyu had less than 4,000 troops in Shan Commandery, and they were all weak and unprepared. He ordered Geshu Han to send troops to recover Shan Luo. Geshu Han immediately wrote a letter to Emperor Xuanzong. Enlushan has been using troops for a long time. Now that he's rebelling, it's impossible that he didn't make preparations. He's definitely using weak troops to lure us in. If we attack, we'll fall into his trap. Moreover, the rebel army's expedition was long and arduous, so speed was their advantage. The imperial army relied on the natural stronghold of Tong Pass to defend against them. Spring Tong, 800 AAA and A. At the same time, Guizi and Li Guangbi were attacking the rebel General Shi Siming in Hebei. They won several major victories, and their progress was very smooth. Guizi and Li Guangbi thought that Tong Pass should be defended and should not be attacked. They wanted to lead the Shuo army to Fanyang and destroy the rebels' nest. But Prime Minister Yang Guozhong suspected that Geshu Han was plotting against him. He said to Emperor Xuanzong, "If Geshu Han does not move, we will miss this opportunity." Emperor Xuanzong believed the slanderous words and ignored Guizi and Li Jimo. He sent messengers to urge Geshu Han to fight. Geshu Han was forced into a corner and wept bitterly. With Feng Changqing and Go Xianji killed as an example, Geshu Han was forced to leave Tong Pass on the 4th day of the 6th month. On the 7th, he met Shui Qianyu's troops at the west plains of Lingbao. Lingbao faced a mountain to the south and the Yellow River to the north. There was a 70-mile-long mountain road in the middle. Shui Qianyu hid his elite troops on a mountain to the south and fought the Tang army on the 8th day. Wang Sili led 50,000 elite troops, and Pang Zhong followed behind with 100,000. Another 30,000 were sent to the north bank of the Yellow River to assist them. When the two armies crossed swords, the Tang army saw that the rebels were disorganized and wanted to escape. So they charged forward but were lured into a narrow road. The rebels suddenly set up an ambush and threw rocks and logs from the mountain. The Tang soldiers were crowded in the narrow road and were unable to spread out. There were many casualties. Geshu Han hurriedly ordered the carts to charge in front, trying to open up a path. But the carts were blocked by the rebels and could not move forward. The Tang army was blinded by the smoke and thought that the rebels were hiding in the smoke. They fired arrows randomly and only realized that they had fallen into a trap when the sun set. At this time, Shui Qianyu ordered the Tongluo elite cavalry to attack the back of the Tang army from the south. The Tang army was attacked from the front and back and was in a mess. Some abandoned their armor and fled into the valley. Some were squeezed into the Yellow River and drowned. The Tang rear army saw that the front was defeated and collapsed without a fight. The Tang army on the north bank of the Yellow River saw that the situation was unfavorable and scattered. Of the 200,000 Tang soldiers, only about 8,000 made it back to Tong Pass. On the 9th day, Shui Qianyu captured Tong Pass. Geshu Han was forced by his subordinates to surrender to Enlushan. This battle was a typical example of ambush in the history of China. Emperor Xuanzong miscalculated the situation and refused to adopt the strategy of defending the stronghold, exhausting the enemy, and waiting for an opportunity to attack. He left Tong Pass too early to counterattack. As a result, he lost both his men and his territory, which caused the war to take a turn for the worse. Shui Qianyu hid his strength and lured the Tang army into an ambush. During the battle, he lowered his flag and tried to escape. He lured the Tang army into the ambush area and won a great victory. Chang and was in chaos when they learned that Tong Pass was lost. Only one or two of the officials went to court. Emperor Xuanzong went to the House of Diligent Government and issued a decree saying that he would personally lead the army, but no one believed him. In the end, Emperor Xuanzong escaped from Yinxiu Gate with the imperial concubine, her sister, the imperial prince, the princess, the imperial concubine, Yang Guozhong, Wei Jiansu, Wei Fongjin, Chun Xuanli, and his attendants. They escaped to Shu under the protection of the 6 imperial guards. Then came the Malwei in mutiny. The Battle of Tong Pass was the most important turning point in the Anji Rebellion. If Tong Pass was still there, Ouyang Shuo was 90% sure that he would win the battle. If Tong Pass was lost, it would be a disaster. Outside Chang, and Ouyang Shuo met up with Feng Xiuan. He heard a series of battle announcements. Battle announcement. A total of 8 lords participated in the Ensure Rebellion, with a total of 450,000 soldiers. The Tang camp has 2 lords, with a total of 5 million soldiers. The Inlushan camp has 6 lords, with a total of 300,000 soldiers. Battle announcement. Because the Tang camp is weaker than the Inlushan camp, according to the battle rules, the Tang camp will automatically receive a 50% increase in defense. Because the Tang camp only had half of the Inlushan camp, the increase was very significant. Battle announcement. According to the results of the nobility and merit test, the Tang camp's dissimulated man is represented by He Yu Wui, Wang Ju. The Inlushan camp's dissimulated man is represented by Di Chun, first-class marquis. Although Di Chun had obtained the merit talisman, he was still a bit away from becoming a duke. It was unknown if Di Chun could be promoted to a duke after the battle. If that was the case, China would soon have a second dynasty. Ouyang Shua suppressed his thoughts and went to register with the quartermaster, as usual. He then asked about the current progress of the battle. "May I ask, General, where are the rebels now? Is Tong Pass still there?" Reporting to the 2 sirs, Tong Pass has been lost a few days ago. The western capital is in chaos. The 2 sirs have led the army to reinforce us. Is the right time? The quartermaster's reply made Ouyang Shua and Feng Qiuhuang's hearts sink. Feng Qiuhuang said, half jokingly and half seriously, "Oh no, we are really going to lose to Dichen this time. To be safe, we should quickly lead the troops into the deep mountains and wait until the battle is over." Hearing this, Ouyang Shua did not say anything, but the quartermaster's expression changed drastically. Ouyang Shua smiled at the quartermaster and said, "General, you don't need to worry. Since we're here to help, we won't give up halfway. Help me tell the palace that this prince will enter the palace to have an audience with His Majesty." Yes. The quartermaster's expression eased up, and he turned to leave. Seeing that Feng Qiuhuang was puzzled, Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Let's go to the tent to discuss." Gaia's deduction of the battle time was indeed out of Ouyang Shua's expectation. Indeed, in history, the Tang dynasty still managed to quell the rebellion after Chong and fell, but that was a matter that happened a few years later. The biggest difference between the battle map and history was that there was a variable, the mutant army. Now that the Inlushan's camp had the 300,000 mutant army of the Yinhuang alliance, would they still be devoured by the provincial governors of the Tang dynasty, like in history? Not necessarily. Moreover, with Di Chun and the others around, the scene of Inlushan's son and Qingxiu wanting to kill his father and causing chaos in the Inlushan's camp would not happen in the battle map. The entire battle situation was extremely disadvantageous to the Tang dynasty's camp. Returning to the tent, Ouyang Shua said to Feng Qiuhuang, "Gaia will not arrange a real deadlock. It seems like we're walking on a dead end, but that is only because we have not found the key to breaking out of this predicament. Although that is true, the Tong Pass has already fallen, and the enemy will soon reach Chang'an. There is not much time left for us." Feng Qiuhuang was still not optimistic. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "There's no need to be anxious. I will go and meet the legendary Tang Xuanzong, Li Longji first. After I return, we will decide what to do. That is the only way." After Feng Qiuhuang left, Ouyang Shua then said to the accompanying military advisor, Pang Tong, "Xuan, we will have to rely on your intelligence to break out of this predicament." For this battle, Ouyang Shua did not bring Jia Su, who he was used to using, but Pang Tong, the newcomer. Naturally, he wanted to give Pang Tong a chance to display his talents and establish a foothold in the resource cabinet. Ouyang Shua was already well-versed in the way of using people. "Rest assured, Your Majesty, I will not let you down." Pang Tong was also a proud person. After transferring from Shu Han to Great Xia and entering the resource cabinet, he naturally wanted to show off. In the resource cabinet, other than Zhang Liang, Jia Su, Zhu Shu, and Chen Gong were all from the same generation as him. Before Ouyang Shua left, Pang Tong suddenly said, "After Your Majesty enters the palace to meet Tang Xuanzong, why don't you find some time to meet the Crown Prince, Li Xiang?" Ouyang Shuo was startled, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. For Pang Tong to say such words, it proved that he had done a lot of homework in the 3 days of preparation for the Insha rebellion. His loyalty was commendable, so how could Ouyang Shuo not feel gratified? I wonder if I'll be able to meet the legendary Yang Gui Fei this time. Looking at the tall city walls of Chong in Ouyang Shuo sighed. Chapter 992. Battle Map, Luoyang. Di Chun and the others arrived outside of Luoyang. Knowing that Tong Pass had been conquered by Cui Qianyu, Di Chun smiled and said to Lord Chunxin and the others, "This time, even Gaia is on our side. Let's see how that old fox will jump around." Ha ha! Lord Chunxin and the others laughed heartily. Being able to beat Ouyang Shuo on the battle map meant a lot to them. Di Chun said, "After we see in Lushan, we will lead our troops to Chang'an. We won't give that old fox any chance." "That's right," Xiongba nodded. With 300,000 soldiers to rely on, Di Chun and the others didn't even care about in Lushan. From the moment the Yin Huang Alliance's army arrived in Luoyang, and Lushan's camp's decisions were up to them. Chang and the eastern suburbs. Ouyang Shuo didn't need to pass through Chang and to see Emperor Xuanzong. In fact, from the Spring Brightness Gate in the east, the first building on the right was Xingqing Palace. Xingqing Palace was the residence of Emperor Xuanzong when he was a vassal king. After Emperor Xuanzong ascended to the throne, it expanded and became one of the 3 main palaces in Chang'an. The other 2 palaces were Taiji Palace and Daming Palace. During the Kaiyuan and Tianbao years, Xingqing Palace was the political center of the Tang dynasty. It was also the long-term residence of Emperor Xuanzong and his beloved concubine, Yang Yuan. After the Enchur rebellion, Xingqing Palace lost its position as the political center and became the residence of the retired emperor or the Empress Dowager. Most of the time, it was the residence of the Empress Dowager and other harem members. In Xingqing Palace, Ouyang Shuo met Emperor Xuanzong, Li Longji, and the Prime Minister, Yang Guozhong. As the longest reigning emperor of the Tang dynasty, Li Longji was 72 years old. His hair was white, his skin sagged, his body was not as good as before, and he was mentally tired. Time was a sharpening stone, silent and unhurried. When Li Longji was young, his ambition to rebuild the country, conquer the world, and look down on the world had long been polished clean. As the supreme emperor of a great country, Li Longji had worked tirelessly and diligently every day for 20 years after he ascended to the throne. He had managed the country, which was weak and difficult for the people, into one where the country was peaceful and the people were at peace, where the people lived and worked in peace, and where tens of thousands of countries had come to visit him. Which monarch under 3 generations could do this? Even the great talents of the Qin emperor, the great strategies of the Han emperor, and the peerless heroes of the current dynasty could not create such a flourishing scene. Thus, at the pinnacle of his life, Li Longji felt great satisfaction when he saw the long list of over 70 countries that came to pay their respects. At the same time, Li Longji felt extremely tired. As the saying went, it was rare to live to 70, and it was even rarer for an emperor to live to 70. After all, the affairs of the country were exhausting during the day, and the beauties were exhausting during the night. It would be a miracle if he didn't die after a few decades. Li Longji had created a miracle. Before the age of 50, although he had been working hard on national affairs day and night, he still took time out of his busy schedule to have 30 sons and 29 daughters. And Lushan's rebellion this time had hurt Li Longji a lot and made him mentally and physically exhausted. Li Longji could be said to have pampered in Lushan very much. If he wanted an official position, he would give him money. If he wanted face, he would give him face. Here were a few examples. And Lushan moved to his new residence in Chang and held a big banquet to celebrate. Li Longji had invited several prime ministers to the palace to play football, but in order to make Lushan happy, he specially ordered the prime ministers to go to Lushan's home to attend the banquet. When Lushan was in Chang, and every time Li Longji ate a delicious food or hunted a rare game, he would immediately send someone to deliver it to Enlushan. To put it bluntly, Li Longji had never been so attentive to his father in his life. What was even more incredible was that, because Enlushan had recognized imperial concubine Yang as his godmother, he could enter the inner palace at will, have intimate contact with her, have dinner with her face-to-face, and sometimes even stay in the palace for a whole night. It was rumored that there was an affair between his godmother and his godson, but his godfather didn't care at all. With such kindness and generosity, even a wild beast with wild ambitions should have developed feelings for him. Yet, Enlushan still rebelled. The loss of Tongguan completely destroyed Li Longji's psychological defense. Now, he just wanted to escape from Chang and then hide in Sichuan, where he could spend the rest of his life with wine and beauties. Yang Guozhong was only in his 40s and was in the prime of his life. His younger sister, Yang Yuhuan, was beautiful, and Yang Guozhong's appearance wasn't bad either. But at this moment, his face was full of panic. According to history, this foreign prime minister, who had stepped on Li Linfu to ascend the throne, would soon reach the end of his life. Objectively speaking, no matter how much Li Linfu used his power to harm the country, because of his extraordinary skill, regardless of whether it was the imperial court or the local government, whether it was civil officials or military generals, he could at least protect them, from top to bottom, making them all obedient. This was somewhat similar to Yin Song, who had just entered Great Xia. Enlushan was extremely favored by the emperor and didn't care about the civil and military officials in the imperial court, but he was respectful to Li Linfu. He was both submissive and afraid of him. When he met Li Linfu, even in the cold season, Enlushan would sweat profusely and his clothes would be soaked. Every time Enlushan's spies in the capital returned to Fanyang to report, he was most concerned about Li Linfu's instructions. If the spies brought back good news about Li Linfu, Enlushan would dance with joy. If Li Linfu showed any dissatisfaction, Enlushan would slap the bed in annoyance and shout, "Oh no, I'm going to die." If Li Linfu hadn't died at this time, Enlushan wouldn't have the courage to rebel. Moreover, as a more pragmatic prime minister who attached importance to the system, Li Linfu more or less did some proper work and implemented some beneficial measures. He wasn't completely without achievements. But Prime Minister Yang, who had taken over Li Linfu's control of the imperial court, was not only lacking in skills, but also devoted himself to flattering, deceiving, scheming, and misusing power abroad. He was basically unwilling to do any proper work. Therefore, although they were both prime ministers who had monopolized power for many years in the history books, Li Linfu was gloriously ranked as a treacherous official, while Yang Guozhong was at most a distant relative. Not to mention the distant past, the current Ungshi rebellion had developed to such a terrible state. Of course, Li Longji was muddle-headed, but Prime Minister Yang, whose mind was full of scheming, was even more to blame. It wasn't without reason that Yang Guozhong was killed by the angry soldiers in Maowei. Ouyang Shual was now faced with such an old emperor and a prime minister who couldn't be seen in public. The reason he was able to meet with Li Longji this time was mostly due to the 150,000 troops outside the city. Li Longji's first sentence made Ouyang Shual choke with anger. "You came at the right time. I've already decided to temporarily hide in Sichuan. You could take the troops and accompany me." Ouyang Shual was speechless. Could he not be so cowardly? "Your Majesty, the 150,000 troops I brought are all elites. They can still fight." Of course, Ouyang Shual didn't want to retreat from Chang, and just like that. Wasn't that equivalent to surrendering? "How dare you?" A shout suddenly rang out in the main hall. Yang Guozhong stood out and pointed at Ouyang Shual. "Everything is done with the safety of His Majesty in mind. Do you dare to defy the decree?" Ouyang Shual's eyes narrowed as he lightly glanced at Yang Guozhong. As the supreme emperor of the Great Xia, it was usually difficult for a historical figure like Yang Guozhong to even see Ouyang Shual. How would he dare to be presumptuous in front of him? Even on the battlefield, Ouyang Shual didn't need to compromise. Yang Guozhong felt his heart palpitate when Ouyang Shual glanced at him. Even though he didn't want to admit it, he had never felt that invisible emperor's aura in front of His Majesty. Cough, cough. Li Longji saw that the loyal prime minister couldn't back down and said, "You don't have to argue. We can't defend Chang anymore. It's better to retreat to Sichuan for the time being and then think about it." If it was 10 or 20 years ago, Li Longji would also have the courage to use Chang and as a natural stronghold to fight against the rebel army with the 150,000 mutant troops. Unfortunately, time waited for no man. Right now, he just wanted to leave this troublesome place. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuan knew that Li Longji had already made up his mind and that there was no point in continuing to argue. He changed the subject and said, "Since your majesty insists, I can only accept the order. However, I have a small request that I hope your majesty can fulfill." "Speak." Li Longji was very happy to receive Ouyang Shua's promise. With the 150,000 troops accompanying him, he didn't need to worry about anything. Now, even if Ouyang Shua wanted a concubine in the palace, Li Longji would agree to it except for Yang Guifei. Ouyang Shua said, "In order to prevent the people's hearts from becoming unstable and causing chaos in the city, your majesty will definitely allow me to bring a group of bodyguards into the city to protect your majesty's safety." In the Battle of Tong Pass, Geshu Han had completely lost the troop station in Chang and the Lanyu battle zone and the temporarily recruited troops from Chang and in Luoyang. The 200,000 troops that the empire had painstakingly gathered were all for naught. At present, there were only 3,000 imperial guards left in Chang'an. It was no wonder that Li Longji wanted to escape. If he didn't escape, he would be captured alive by Lushan. Hearing that Ouyang Shua wanted to bring troops into the city to assist in the defense, Li Longji agreed without hesitation. Seeing that Ouyang Shua was so considerate, Li Longji naturally knew how to return the favor. He directly gave Ouyang Shua a temporary title and a token. With this token, Ouyang Shua could bring troops into the city at any time, and no one would dare to stop him. Seeing this, Yang Guozhong originally wanted to play some politics, but he was stunned by Ouyang Shua just now. At this moment, he still hadn't recovered from his shock and could only watch helplessly as this dissimulated man suddenly became His Majesty's favorite. Instinctively, Yang Guozhong felt threatened, and his eyes were filled with jealousy. What about Ouyang Shua? From beginning to end, he didn't even look at Yang Guozhong. After receiving the token, he conveniently took his leave. After Ouyang Shua left, Yang Guozhong only dared to sow discord. Isn't His Majesty too fond of that dissimulated man? It doesn't matter. As long as we can smoothly return a Shu, dealing with that dissimulated man will be a piece of cake. Your Majesty is wise. Seeing that the Emperor still favored him, Yang Guozhong hurriedly flattered. After leaving Xingqing Palace, Ouyang Shua didn't return to the camp. Instead, he turned and walked towards the Crown Prince's residence. Chapter 993. Ouyang Shua was not in a hurry to go to the Crown Prince's residence. Instead, he summoned a squad of guards and handed the token Li Longji had given him to the squad leader. "Give this token to the military counselor and have him dispatch troops into the city." "Yes." The squad leader turned and left. Ouyang Shua was greatly disappointed by the meeting with Li Longji and Yang Guozhong. The two were determined to retreat, but Ouyang Shua would not let them have their way. With 150,000 elite soldiers under his command, Ouyang Shua could do what others wanted to do, but could not. Ouyang Shua gradually understood why Pang Tong wanted him to visit Crown Prince Li Xiang. As the Crown Prince of the Tang Dynasty, Li Xiang lived a very useless life. From the moment he was appointed as the Crown Prince, Li Xiang was under the threat of Prime Minister Li Linfu and Yang Guozhong, and his days were extremely difficult. During Li Linfu's reign, he used Li Xiang's wife's in-laws to cause two major cases in order to eradicate the Crown Prince's party. Li Xiang was forced to divorce both times, which was extremely heartbreaking and traumatizing. Yang Guozhong succeeded as prime minister and fought with Li Xiang both openly and secretly. Chang and looked calm on the surface, but danger was everywhere on the inside. It was only when the Inshu rebellion broke out that Li Xiang found a chance to counterattack. Without a doubt, the mastermind behind the Maui Rebellion was Crown Prince Li Xiang. Emperor Xuanzong of Tang escaped from Shu with 3,000 imperial guards. Li Heng brought up the rear with him, and there were 2,000 people behind him, including the Flying Dragon Imperial Guards, the elite unit of the Imperial Guards. On the 14th day of the 6th month, the fleeing army arrived at Maui Station. The Imperial Army soldiers, hungry and exhausted, were already beginning to complain. This disturbance provided Li Heng, who had been secretly plotting a mutiny, with a perfect opportunity. Yang Guozhong was chased to the west gate of Maui by the well-arranged imperial soldiers and was beheaded. His son Yang Xian and Madame Han were also killed. Li Heng planned the Maui Rebellion and killed Madame Yang, pointing the finger at Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. Emperor Xuanzong's entry into Shu was irreversible, and the father and son had to go their separate ways. On the 9th day of the 7th month of the 15th year of the Tianbao Rebellion, Li Heng arrived at Lingwu, the headquarters of the Shuafang army. After some preparations and planning, a simple coronation ceremony was held on the 12th day of the 7th month at the southern gate of Lingwu city. Thus, the Inshu rebellion ushered in another turning point. Hearing that Ouyang Shua had come to visit, Li Xiang did not dare to neglect him and personally led him into the residence. At this time, Li Xiang was already 45 years old. He was no longer an elegant young man, but a slightly plump middle-aged man with a frown on his face. Ouyang Shua did not expect that such a crown prince would have the guts to start a mutiny. The mutiny at Maui was definitely not an impromptu idea. Judging by the time, Li Xiang was already planning it. Your Highness, are you planning to use extreme means to kill Prime Minister Yang Guozhong? Ouyang Shua went straight to the point. Bang! The exquisite ceramic teacup shattered on the ground, and the tea splashed everywhere. By the time of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang, the tea ceremony had already become popular. Lu Yu, the tea sage, lived during the Inshu rebellion. Li Xiang didn't seem to notice it at all. His face instantly turned pale, and he said in a trembling voice, I don't understand what you're saying. Ouyang Shua smiled. Your Highness, you don't need to worry. With the 150,000 troops I'll lead, I'll be able to help you accomplish whatever you want to do in Chang'an. By the way, I'll tell you a piece of news. His Majesty has already allowed me to deploy troops into the city to assist in the defense. Maybe they've already entered the city. Li Xiang's heart trembled. He waved away the servant who was about to clean up the teacup and forced himself to calm down. If that's the case, what do I need to do? Ouyang Shua nodded approvingly and said, Your Highness, have you heard of this saying? I'd like to hear it. Li Xiang lowered his posture. The emperor guards the gates of the country, and the king dies for the country. Li Xiang was stunned. This saying came from the future and was used to describe the Ming dynasty. Naturally, he had never heard of it before. But connecting it with his current situation, Li Xiang immediately understood the meaning behind it. You mean, you want me to stay in Chang'an? Why? You don't dare? Li Xiang felt defeated. He was the crown prince after all, but in front of this dissimulated man, he didn't have any imposing manner at all. He was completely suppressed. He gritted his teeth and said, Tong Pass has been captured by the rebel army. If you stay in Chang'an, can you defend it? Worrying about the safety of Chang'an was only one of his reasons. Actually, Li Xiang had another intention. He wanted to contact Guizi and the other provincial governors. They were the Tang army, loyal to the Tang dynasty, unlike the dissimulated man army outside the city. Ouyang Shua's dark eyes seemed to see through Li Xiang's thoughts. He said lightly, It's up to me whether I can defend it or not. Your Highness, you don't need to worry about it. Li Xiang's face tightened, and his hands and his sleeves clenched into fists. Humiliation. This is a naked humiliation to the imperial power. Ouyang Shua didn't want to stay any longer. He stood up and said, The big change will happen tonight. Your Highness, please make early preparations. At this moment, Ouyang Shua was very much like those powerful ministers in history who abolished their own power, such as Hua Guang and Dong Zhuo. In the eyes of Li Xiang and the others, he was a first-class devil. Li Xiang stood still and didn't know how to react. Before leaving, Ouyang Shua said lightly, Your Highness, please remember this. Chang'an lacks loyalty, brave generals, and people with lofty ideals, but it doesn't lack princes. Li Xiang clenched his fists, and his nails slowly sank into his flesh. After leaving the crown prince's residence, Ouyang Shuo led his troops to the residence that Li Longji had arranged for him. Feng Qiuhuang, Pang Tong, Shi Hu, and the others were already waiting there. Pang Tong received the token sent by Ouyang Shuo and immediately understood. He immediately deployed 30,000 mountain barbarian heavy infantry and 3,000 divine martial guards into the city to take over the various city gates and passes. Your Highness, Chang, and city is already under our control, Pang Tong reported. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, Military advisor knows me well. Next, how to make Li Longji obediently abdicate, and how to arrange for Crown Prince Li Xiang to ascend to the throne. I still need you to make some arrangements. Since Li Xiang was destined to ascend to the throne through a mutiny, Ouyang Shuo might as well fulfill his wish. However, the place of ascension was not Lingwu City, but Chang'an City. This way, it would be even more justifiable. Through this, Ouyang Shuo could also control the Tang dynasty's camp and mobilize the power of the entire Tang dynasty to deal with the rebel army instead of fighting alone. Rest assured, Your Highness. Pang Tong was full of confidence. On the other hand, Feng Qiuhuang still had a look of puzzlement. She asked, Wu, what are you up to? Don't tell me you really want to defend Chang'an City? Is there something wrong? Ouyang Shuo asked. It's very wrong. Feng Qiuhuang was furious. Other than the mountain barbarian heavy infantry, the remaining 120,000 troops are all cavalry. How are we going to defend the city? How are we going to defend it? If we only defend the city, we won't be able to obtain a decisive victory. I have an idea. With that, Ouyang Shuo revealed his plan. After he finished speaking, the entire meeting hall fell silent. Not a single sound could be heard. You're mad, Feng Qiuhuang exclaimed. Ouyang Shuo smiled without saying a word. Gaia had already tied a dead knot for the Tang dynasty's camp by deducing the military campaign's plot to such a special point in time. To break out of an extraordinary situation, they had to do extraordinary things. They could not follow Gaia's train of thought. This is the only way to obtain victory. Feng Wu, you have to believe me. Ouyang Shuo tried to convince Feng Qiuhuang. Feng Qiuhuang said with a bitter smile, I've already boarded your pirate ship. What else can I do? With the plan in place, everyone split up. The rebel army could storm Chang'an City at any time. They did not have much time left, so they had to race against time. Luoyang. While Ouyang Shuo was conversing with Li Longji, Di Chun had also met in Lushan. People like in Lushan did not trust others easily. In Lushan, who came from a warlord background, believed in one principle. Whoever has more troops has bigger fists. Whoever has bigger fists is the boss. Di Chin's sudden arrival at Luoyang with an army of 300,000 gave in Lushan immense pressure. In Lushan had wanted to order Cui Qianyu, who had taken down Tong Pass, to not wait for the follow-up troops and directly attack Chang'an. However, he was stopped by Di Chun. There are 150,000 mutant troops stationed in Chang'an. If Cui Qianyu attacks Chang'an now, he'll be sending himself to his death. If he's not careful, the enemy might take the opportunity to recapture Tong Pass, Di Chun said. However, Lushan did not believe it. Are the enemy's mutant troops that powerful? Although I don't want to admit it, they are more powerful than you think. Even though he had the upper hand, Di Chun did not dare to underestimate his opponent. He was a man who could create miracles. Lushan asked, Then, what do you think we should do? Let Cui Qianyu and his troops guard Tong Pass and not take a step out. When I lead the army to Tong Pass, we'll move together. We'll flatten Chang'an, and with the force of a thunderbolt. What if they run away? Di Chun smiled. If they really run away, that would be the best. That night, the arrival of 30,000 mountain barbarians' heavy infantry in Chang'an made the already rumored capital even livelier. Some said that this army was here to protect the emperor's retreat. Others said that the army was here to defend Chang'an. There were even bizarre rumors that the army was here to occupy Chang'an. In any case, when night fell, Chang'an was under a routine curfew. What was different from before was that the soldiers in charge of patrolling the main streets of Chang'an were replaced by the mountain barbarian soldiers who were stationed during the day. Xingqing Palace and the Crown Prince's residence were the main targets of the army's protection. That night, Chang'an was destined to not be peaceful. In the night, the 3,000 Shinwu guards suddenly rushed into Xingqing Palace. With lightning speed, they took down the 1,000 imperial guards stationed in the palace and completely took control of Xingqing Palace. Then, Crown Prince Li Xiang came and had a face-to-face conversation with his father, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. When Li Xiang left Xingqing Palace, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang collapsed on the ground. Yang Guifei, who was still as beautiful as ever, accompanied him. She looked delicate and pitiful with mottled eyes. Unfilial son, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang was full of resentment. He kept cursing, but no one cared. Xingqing Palace, which used to be solemn, suddenly became chilly, like a cold palace. At the same time, a group of fierce-looking soldiers came to the Prime Minister's mansion. Without saying a word, they killed Prime Minister Yang Guozhong, who was still scheming against others, on the spot. That night, the city of Chang'an changed. Chapter 994. Heavenly Treasure Year 15, June 10th, Chang'an. Early in the morning, Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang Dynasty, Li Longji, issued the last imperial edict of his reign. Today, there are traitors in Lushan and Shi Siming who have betrayed the emperor's grace and offended their superiors, causing the world to fall into chaos and the people to be plunged into misery and suffering. I am old and have the heart to kill the enemy, but I am powerless to unite the people of the world. For the continuation of the country and for the welfare of all the people in the world, the empire needs a firmer and more powerful emperor. The crown prince, Li Xiang, was young and strong. He had both ability and integrity and could inherit the throne. Today, I am willing to abdicate the throne to Crown Prince Li Xiang. Along with the imperial edict, there is also a declaration to suppress the rebels. From today onwards, the imperial edict of abdication would be disseminated to all the provinces and counties of the world along with the declaration of extermination, commanding the entire army to gather in Chang'an and then work together to suppress the rebellion. Thus, the public opinion of the world changed. Not only the people of Chang'an, but the billions of people in the world also saw the determination of the imperial court to fight against the traitors. With such an impassioned and united spirit, there was no need to worry about not getting rid of the traitors. On that day, under the support of the civil and military officials, Li Xiang officially ascended the throne. He changed his era name to Zizda and elected Emperor Xuanzong of Tang as the retired emperor. He lived in Xingqing Palace, which was equivalent to being imprisoned. After he ascended to the throne, Li Xiang immediately decreed that Ouyang Shuo was conferred the title of King Xia and was appointed as the marshal of the army. He was given the authority to command all the troops in the country and fight against the rebels. He appointed Guizi as the deputy marshal, the minister of war, the minister of peace under the Hall of Governmental Affairs, and, at the same time, the Shuofeng Jidushi. In order to clarify the relationship between the upper and lower levels, so that the Jidushi would not impede each other, the decree also clearly stipulated that the northern troops, including the Anshi Jidushi, Fighting Jidushi, Hushi Jidushi, and Lonyu Jidushi, as well as the northern Jidushi's troops, as long as they could be transferred. A total of 150,000 troops would be placed under Guizi's temporary control. Just this alone was enough to excite the world. Luoyang, Di Chun, and the others were just about to lead their troops to the Tong Pass when they received an urgent report that there was a change in Chang'an. The throne had been changed. As expected of an old fox, he actually thought of such a trick. Di Chun sighed with emotion. Xiongba said, "From the looks of it, the old fox is determined to fight to the death with us in Chang'an. That's good as well. We can decide the victor in one battle and save a lot of trouble. That being said, We can't be in such a hurry to send out our troops. Chang is a majestic city with 150,000 soldiers guarding it. It won't be easy to take it down. At the very least, we need to prepare our siege weapons. Then let's wait a few more days, Xiongba said helplessly. Lord Chunshan interrupted. Since the situation has changed, we should not foolishly fight alone. We have to bring all of Lushan's troops and attack Chang'an together. Well said. We don't know anything about Chang'an. We need someone like Lushan to be our guide. I heard that Lushan has planted a large number of spies in Chang'an. We can't let them go to waste. Everyone discussed and found that Lushan's camp still had the upper hand, so they immediately felt confident. While Di Chun and the others were busy preparing for the battle, Ouyang Shuo was not idle either. Yang Guozhong's death seemed to be silent, but it had already set off a storm among the high officials and nobles in Chang'an. The ministers who were close to Yang Guozhong felt a chill on their necks. Naturally, everyone thought that although Yang Guozhong was killed by the mutant men, the mastermind behind the scenes must be the newly crowned emperor. It was an open secret that the two did not get along. The high officials and nobles who were close to Yang Guozhong were naturally worried that they would be punished. How could they know that the real master of Chang was not the one sitting on the dragon throne, but Ouyang Shuo? Ouyang Shuo was not a homicidal maniac. Killing was just a means, not an end. After killing Yang Guozhong, Ouyang Shuo used the name of the Grand Marshal of the army to start a conscription in Chang'an. At the beginning of the Inshur Rebellion, Feng Changqing had already started a conscription in Chang and in Luoyang. Most of the conscripted commoners had died in the Battle of Tong Pass. Thus, the second conscription was even more difficult. Ouyang Shuo targeted the guards of the high officials and nobles and the private soldiers of the generals. These people's fighting strength was much stronger than the commoners. Feng Changqing did not dare to touch these people because he did not dare to offend these high officials and nobles. Ouyang Shuo did not have such concerns. Even if he poked a big hole in Chang, and it would not affect the main plain. After the battle, he could just leave. This time, Chang was immediately in chaos. Ouyang Shuo was not a boorish person. He naturally understood the principle of using peaceful means before using force. He first sent an official document to the families in the name of the Grand Marshal of the army, asking them to voluntarily offer their guards and private soldiers to fight against the strong enemy. The time limit was 1 day. 1 day later, the barbarian soldiers would go from house to house. If anyone was found to be hiding something, sorry, they would be punished with a war tax. If it was serious, they would be exterminated. When it was time to be cruel and merciless, Ouyang Shuo would not be soft-hearted. The vast Chang and city was full of hidden talents. If these guards and private soldiers were really gathered together, there would be no less than 50 to 60,000 people. With proper equipment and a little training, they would be a qualified army. Chang and city lacked everything except weapons and armor. In the major arsenals, there were mountains of longbows, tang knives, long spears, pikes, and all kinds of armor. For a time, Ouyang Shuo was blinded by the dazzling light. This was indeed the prosperous Kaiyuan period. It was really rich. How could such resources be wasted? Ouyang Shuo had another idea. He announced to all the young men in the city that as long as they joined the army, they would immediately be rewarded with 5 strings of coins, equivalent to 50 meters of rice. It was the monthly salary of a 4th-rank official. Those who killed the enemy and performed meritorious deeds would also be rewarded. In any case, he was spending money from the Great Tang's treasury, so Ouyang Shuo did not feel the slightest heartache. As the saying went, if there is a heavy reward, there will be brave men. With such generous rewards and in such troubled times, in just 1 day, 20,000 young men signed up. Ouyang Shuo naturally did not expect these new soldiers to go into battle. He gathered them, trained them a little, and used them to transport supplies, treat the wounded, and clean up the battlefield. Other than conscription, there was another matter that Ouyang Shuo was very concerned about, strengthening the city's defenses. The Great Tang had been at peace for too long. Although the city walls were mostly intact, the stored supplies were far from what they had expected. They had to be replenished in a short time. Even if they followed Ouyang Shua's plan, there would still be a fierce battle on the city walls. To do this, they naturally had to mobilize the people of the city, whether they were men or women, old or young. As long as they had strength, they would all have to serve and assist the army in strengthening the city's defenses. In order to not incite public discontent, Ouyang Shua waved his brush and had the imperial court provide meals, with meat for every meal. Besides increasing the number of supplies, Ouyang Shua was also preparing to dig trenches outside the city. This was the largest project. Time was tight and the task heavy. Ouyang Shua had no choice but to use a sea of people. Besides conscripting the people of Chong, and Ouyang Shua also dispatched cavalry to the surrounding villages to recruit laborers. One could say that Ouyang Shua had basically mobilized all the resources he could. On the surface, it seemed like he really was preparing to fight to the death with the rebel army in Chong. While they were busy, a few strange things were happening in Chong, and that no one noticed. Chapter 995. Ever since the new emperor ascended to the throne, the mutant army, especially the cavalry, had been entering and exiting the city gates. No one knew what they were up to, but after a while, everyone got used to it. This was only on the surface. Every night, Chong and city would be filled with killing intent. With the help of the court officials, Ouyang Shua mobilized the Divine Guards to carry out a huge purge in Chong and city, trying to remove as many of Lushan's spies as possible. However, time was limited, and the Divine Guards were not professionals in this field. The officials in the court all had their own thoughts, so the purge did not go smoothly. There were bound to be fish that slipped through the net in Chong and city. Ouyang Shua had no choice but to order Shur who to strengthen the city gates and cut off all communication channels. On the fourth day of the battle at Baqiao, Baqiao was located 10 miles east of Chong and city on the Baqiao River. It was the east gate of Chong and city and connected to the main traffic routes in the east. Early in the morning, Ouyang Shua secretly rushed to Baqiao to bid farewell to Feng Qiuhuang and the rest. The trick of soldiers entering and leaving Chong and city was just to cover up the withdrawal of the main force from the barracks. There were only 20,000 Tiger Leopard cavalry left in the barracks east of Chong and city, led by Ma Xiao. The remaining 100,000 cavalrymen were led by Ran Min, Ma Chao, and Feng Qiuhuang. They headed north to Lingwu City to meet up with Guozi's Tang Dynasty army. Ouyang Shua wanted to use Chong and city as bait to attract the main force of the rebel army and buy time for Guozi to wipe out Shur Siming's army in one fell swoop before heading straight for Lushan's nest, Fanyang. In order to end the battle quickly, Ouyang Shua did not hesitate to take the risk and mobilized 100,000 cavalrymen to help. With the help of these elite soldiers and the ability of Guozi, he would definitely be able to destroy the rebel army in one fell swoop without the impediment of the eunuchs and military governors. The prerequisite was that Chong and city had to survive the main force of the rebel army. As soon as the new emperor ascended to the throne, he sent out a summons to the entire country and ordered the entire country to protect the emperor. If Chong was lost, everything would be over. In order to defend Chong and city, other than recruiting new soldiers, Ouyang Shua, in the name of the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains, ordered the military governor of Jiannan to lead 30,000 elite soldiers to reinforce Chong and city. Roughly estimating, the troops guarding Chong and consisted of 30,000 mountain barbarian heavy infantry, 20,000 Tiger Leopard cavalry, 30,000 Jiannan elites, and 60,000 newly reorganized recruits, amounting to a total of 140,000 soldiers. The number of young adults recruited was estimated to be around 100,000. With this army, Ouyang Shua was confident that he could fight against the rebel army. In the blink of an eye, a week had passed. The preparation for war in Chong was coming to an end. The vanguard of the rebel army had also appeared on the outskirts of Chang'an. Just a day ago, the Jiannan regional commander finally arrived at Chang, and with 30,000 elite soldiers. A great battle was about to begin. On the 10th day of the battle, the main force of the rebel army finally arrived outside Chang. Apart from the 300,000 mutant soldiers, Enlushan's camp also had 150,000 rebel soldiers under the command of Enlushan's son, Enchingshu. An elite army of 450,000 was enough to devour everything. Apart from that, there was also a group of special guests in the army. They were dressed in tattered clothes, and their faces were filled with fear. They were ordinary citizens who were herded forward by the army like cattle. The army set up camp 10 miles outside Chang'an city. Just a little further ahead was the Ba River. Di Chun and the rest rode across the Ba River and observed the towering Chang'an city from afar. Seeing the moat outside Chang'an city, Di Chun smiled. I knew the old fox would play this trick. In the Battle of Mai, Ouyang Shua had used the moat to win a battle. Now, he was using the same trick again. He's at his wit's end. Lord Chunshin smiled confidently. After watching for a while, Di Chun spurred his horse back. Let's go back. We'll officially attack the city tomorrow. I want to see what other tricks the old fox has up his sleeve. The next morning, the vast army crossed the Ba River and arrived at the city. The north and east sides of Chang'an city were protected by wide moats, making it difficult to attack. This time, the rebel army chose to attack the city from the west and south gates. The vast army circled around the east gate and got into position. In order to avoid confusion, Di Chun and Enchingshu agreed that the 300,000 mutants would be responsible for attacking the south gate, while the 150,000 rebels would be responsible for attacking the west gate. Just getting the army into position took 2 hours. On the city walls, the newly reorganized new army looked at the vast army outside the city with panic in their eyes. They had just learned how to line up, and now they were thrown into a cruel battlefield. In order to train the new army, Ouyang Shua divided the 60,000 new army equally between the west and south walls. The 30,000 Jiannan elite soldiers and 30,000 barbarian heavy infantry were also stationed on the two sides. Other than that, the barbarian infantry also served as supervisors. The real battle started at 10 o'clock in the morning. Groups of ordinary people were being driven by the army as they laboriously pushed siege vehicles, catapults, and mobile arrow towers towards the city walls. When they came across a moat, a temporary bridge was built. Under Di Chin's suggestion, these commoners were conscripted by Enchingshu from around Tong Pass. They were to be used as cannon fodder to reduce the losses of the army. These bastards, they're insane. Sure Hu and the other generals couldn't help but feel pity for them. However, this was a battle of life and death, and there was no room for mercy. Fire! With an order, the catapults on the city walls began to move. Sharp whistles tore through the sky one after another, and black spots rose up on the city tower, like a flock of sparrows soaring into the sky. The densely packed stones rapidly expanded in the field of vision. Thousands of stones the size of millstones fell from the sky with a terrible momentum, like a dense meteor shower falling into the sea, splashing blood-red waves. Hundreds and thousands of innocent commoners lay in pools of blood, dyeing the ground beneath their feet red. The mournful wails of the commoners resounded through the clouds, moving the hearts of those who saw them. The soldiers guarding the city couldn't bear to see them die. Those were their fellow countrymen. However, military orders were absolute. They could only cry silently as they launched their attacks. Di Chun and the rest didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. After one batch was killed, another batch was sent in. Those who dare to retreat will be killed without mercy. Di Chun ordered the law enforcers. For the commoners, there was still a chance of survival if they moved forward, but they would definitely be executed if they retreated. They had no choice but to move forward. In this chaotic world, lives were like grass. Since the battle map didn't have any side effects, it was easier to arouse the dark side of people. Ouyang Shua had abolished officials at will in Chang, and used the national treasury at will, and conscripted laborers. Di Chin didn't care about the lives of the commoners, and trampled on them wantonly. With the army in their hands, They could change the rules of the battle at will. For the commoners on the battle map, no matter which side they were on, they were all demons from another world. As soon as the battle began, it was a long-range competition between the two sides. The goal of the rebel army was clear. They wanted to suppress the long-range firepower of the defending army through the catapults and mobile arrow towers, clearing the way for the infantry to attack. In less than an hour, more than 10,000 commoners had died on the battlefield. Their corpses filled the trenches, completing their mission. Di-chun smiled with satisfaction and gave the order to attack. He seemed to have seen the moment when the army broke through the city walls, entered the city, and captured Ouyang Shuo alive. Victory was at hand. Kill! The elite divisions stepped on the corpses of the commoners, braving the rain of arrows, and charged toward the city wall. The tide of people was like a mountain or a sea. The rumbling of the carriages, the clanking of the armors, and the whistling of the horses made the defending soldiers on the city wall feel a chill in their hearts. When the dark mass of the army was 500 meters away from the city wall, the defending army's counterattack began. Fire at will. The catapults were suppressed by the rebel army, but the defending army still had strong bows and crossbows. A dense rain of arrows poured down, bringing with it uncountable death and fear. Without orders, even if there was a mountain of knives and a sea of fire in front of them, the rebel army soldiers didn't dare to take a step back. They stepped on the blood of the square formation in front of them and launched wave after wave of attacks. The closer they got to the city wall, the fiercer the counterattack of the defending army became. Arrows poured down like a storm, and stones fell in large numbers like birds. The falling stones were so heavy that the ground trembled when they hit it. The stones fell in the battle formation, smashing big holes in the ground. The rebel army soldiers were swept down one after another, crying and screaming. The rebel army soldiers only cared about rushing forward, regardless of the casualties. At this moment, the area within 100 meters of the western and southern city walls had become hell. Hundreds of large crossbows installed on the city tower fired at the same time, sweeping away waves and waves of arrows. The arrows covered the sky, and wherever they went, blood and flesh flew. In this terrible storm of metal, flesh and blood were as fragile as paper. The soldiers in the front row didn't even have time to shout for help before they were instantly smashed to pieces. Screams, moans, blood, death, and people trampled each other in panic. The rain of arrows flew like locusts, and the sharp sound of the wind piercing through the air filled the air. It was suffocating. Arrows flew everywhere, and stones fell like hailstones. The rebel army didn't dare to look up or take a step. Some soldiers tried to lie on the ground and pretend to be dead, but they were immediately trampled into meat paste by the follow-up troops. The soldiers screamed, cried, and huddled together, trampling each other. Some people tried to hide, but their heads were trampled by panicked warhorses. Miserable screams came from far away. It didn't sound like a battlefield, but more like a slaughterhouse. On the top of the battle formation, Di-chun and the others looked serious. Before the battle started, they never thought that the counterattack of the Chong and defending army would be so fierce. Didn't they say that the old fox only brought cavalry? Where did he get the defending army? Di-chun was puzzled, and for the first time, he felt a trace of uneasiness. The cannon fodder tactic had a good start, but it didn't bring the good result that Di-chun wanted. The 100,000 young men that Ouyang Shuo had temporarily recruited had made the greatest contribution in this battle. In close combat, these men, who weren't even recruits, really couldn't do much. But they were very competent in operating the crossbows, throwing stones, throwing logs, and transporting supplies. In times of danger, these men showed the courage and bravery of the Tang dynasty men. They were not afraid of death. In order to protect their wives and children in the city, they didn't hesitate to fight to the death. The Tang dynasty's heroic spirit could be seen clearly. Chapter 996. The first day of the rebel army's attack ended in failure. The price they paid was the lives of more than 30,000 innocent people and 40,000 elite troops. Chong and was stronger than Di Chun and the others had expected. As night fell, the setting sun shone on the blood-stained city walls, the dilapidated towers, the piles of corpses at the foot of the city walls, and the ground that was dyed red by the corpses. After the system update, the corpses could no longer be swept away. To avoid spreading the plague, Ouyang Shu ordered to bury the corpses on the spot or burn them together under the cover of darkness. Billowing black smoke mixed with a foul smell spread in the air, making people's hair stand on end. In the rustling cold wind, faint sobs could be heard. It was the sorrow of losing their loved ones. After a day of fierce fighting, more than 20,000 of the 100,000 young men temporarily recruited were killed. Most of them were injured by the rebel army's catapults or mobile arrow towers. The 60,000 new soldiers were even worse off. They lost 1/3 of their men. The men of the Tang Empire lived up to their name. At night, a rumor gradually spread that the rebel army only wanted to clean up the emperor's side and did not want to rebel. After the army entered Chong, they would not offend the people and hoped that the people would not make unnecessary sacrifices. And Lushan's spies in the city began to work. As soon as the rumor came out, some people really believed it, especially those who saw their neighbors killed in the battle. They were even more worried that such a disaster would befall them. The people had lived peacefully for a long time and hated war. It would be better if they could stop fighting. As a result, the people's hearts began to waver. Ouyang Shuo snorted at the rumor and ordered people to put up a notice, saying, "The rebel army rebelled under the slogan of crusading against Yang Guozhong. Yang Guozhong has long been executed, but the rebel army has not stopped their rebellion. Their wild ambition is obvious. This is the first reason. During the day, the rebel army drove the innocent people to attack the city. They are crazy and have no sympathy for the people. It is obvious that they did not offend the people. This is the second reason. With these two reasons, it shows that the rebel army is cunning and their words cannot be trusted." As soon as the rumor-refuting notice was posted, the people were suddenly awakened. Yes, the rebel army did not care about the lives of the people outside the city. If they really entered the city, would they let them go? It could be said that the rebel army's act of driving the people away during the day was digging their own graves. At the same time, Ouyang Shuo once again sent out the divine martial guards to deal with the rats that had jumped out. He cleaned them up so that they wouldn't jump out again to disgust people. Over the next 2 days, the rebel army launched fierce attacks on Chong and city again and again. Each time, they returned without any success, leaving only cold corpses behind. Chong and city was like a greedy beast from the abyss, endlessly devouring fresh lives. After attacking the city for 3 days, the morale of the rebel army plummeted. "We can't go on like this. Sooner or later, we will fall at the foot of the city wall." Di Chun was still able to keep his composure. He clenched his teeth and made up his mind. "We have to change our battle strategy and win by surprise." The few of them gathered together and urgently discussed countermeasures. The atmosphere in the group was no longer as relaxed as it was at the beginning. All of them were extremely solemn and frowning. Only when it was late at night did they disperse. On the 15th day of the battle, in Chang'an, the attack of the rebel army in the morning was no different from the previous 2 days. The only difference was that the attack of the rebel army was more ferocious. They did not care about sacrifices and were not afraid of death. It was as if they had cut off all means of retreat. The enemy is going all out. Everyone, stay alert. On the city wall, the slightly experienced regimental captains noticed the abnormality of the enemy and reminded their men to pay attention. There were no eyes on the battlefield. A small mistake could be fatal, not to mention at such a critical moment. The 3 consecutive days of fierce attacks by the rebel army were also a huge test for the defending army. Casualties, diseases, fatigue, fear, and so on constantly eroded the will of the defending army. The soldiers were constantly on the verge of collapse. If the attack continued like this, the defending army might not be able to resist. After all, the difference in strength between the two sides was obvious. However, the rebel army had suffered heavy casualties and their morale was at rock bottom. They might not be able to hold on until the moment the city was breached. This was a battle of wills and also a psychological battle between the commanders of both sides. It all depended on who could hold on first. Without a doubt, Di Chun and the others were the first to be unable to sit still and were ready to change their battle strategy. At noon, when everyone was at their most relaxed, the rebel army suddenly made a new move. They saw that the 70,000 soldiers that Di Chun had been treating as reserve troops suddenly moved. Not good. Sure, Hu and the other generals felt their hearts sink. The rebel army sending in reserve troops at this time was really fatal. Fight to the death. The bravery of the barbarian soldiers was vividly displayed at this moment. For the glory of the dynasty, the 30,000 barbarians did not hesitate to die here to defend the glory of their king. Just when Sure Hu and the others were ready to fight to the death, the 70,000 soldiers suddenly turned and moved toward the east. Their target was the east city gate that had not been moved. This is a diversion. The 70,000 soldiers rushed toward the east like hungry wolves. Di Chun's goal was very simple. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity when the defending army was attracted to the west and south to try to open a gap in the east city wall and reverse the situation. Then, which troop of the Tang dynasty was guarding the east city wall? It was none other than the original 3,000 imperial guards of Chang'an City. Although the retired Emperor Lilongji had left Xingqing Palace with his beloved concubine and hid in the Taiji Palace in the inner city as soon as the battle started, the 3,000 imperial guards were still guarding the east city wall. In the face of the sudden attack of 70,000 rebel soldiers, even with the moat as a cover, the 3,000 imperial guards would not be able to defend. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he immediately called Ma Xiao over. "It's time for you to show up." "Yes." Ma Xiao straightforwardly saluted, turned around, and left. The 20,000 Tiger Leopard cavalry rode their horses to the East City District and uniformly got off their horses. Like hungry wolves, they climbed up the city wall with swords in their hands. They immediately became elite infantry and surrounded the East City wall. In any case, Ouyang Shuo was a veteran, so how could he not leave a reserve force? It was to guard against the rebel army. The battle was about to start. The surprise attack of the rebel army did not work, and it immediately became a bitter battle. The surprise attack of the rebel army caught the defending army unprepared. The eastern side did not have enough archers to fully display the killing power of the giant crossbows, nor did they have any auxiliary troops to transport the defensive supplies. Soon, the 70,000 rebel soldiers killed their way to the top of the city wall and fought with the Tiger Leopard cavalry. The scene was very tragic, and it looked like they were going to defend to the death. Fortunately, the Tiger Leopard cavalry were the elites of the elites and the trump card of the trump card. Their combat power was really terrifying. Under the leadership of Ma Xiao, they stubbornly repelled the enemy's attacks and tenaciously defended their position. The might of the great Xia army was invincible. Just as the two sides were fighting fiercely, a team suddenly appeared on the outskirts of Chang'an. They looked at the battlefield from afar and did not come over. Upon closer inspection, they realized that the fastest troops to rescue the emperor had finally arrived in Chang'an. The Battle of Chang'an had ushered in a turning point. Di Chun received the news and did not dare to take the risk, so he immediately ordered a retreat. The day's siege ended anticlimactically, and the battle situation was becoming more and more disadvantageous for the Lushan camp. The troops that arrived today were just the beginning. Over the next few days, more and more troops gathered in Chang'an, causing the rebel army to not dare to attack the city. They directly retreated to the barracks east of the Bar River. This is so frustrating. Although Di Chun was depressed, and Qingxi was even more irritable. After a few days of fighting, 1/3 of the 150,000 troops that Qingxi brought had already been killed. However, Chang'an still stood tall and did not even lose a hair. As the various troops arrived in Chang'an, the hope of attacking Chang'an became more and more uncertain. It could even be said that when the troops increased, whether they could retreat in one piece was a problem. And Qingxi was already quite dissatisfied with Di Chun and the others, and even had the idea of leading his troops back to Luoyang. At most, I'll withdraw from Fanyang. And Qingshu had other ideas in mind. Little did he know that the retreat route that in Qingshu thought had already disappeared. Just 2 days ago, Guizi led the 150,000 Tang troops and 100,000 elite cavalrymen. Not only did they wipe out Shi Siming's troops, but they also directly attacked Fanyang and destroyed in Lushan's nest. Now, this army was heading straight for Luoyang with the momentum of a great victory. Chapter 997. Early the next morning, and Qingshu received an urgent report from Luoyang. Fanyang had fallen, and Luoyang was in a state of emergency. And Qingshu didn't even think about it. He hurriedly informed Di Chun and immediately led his troops to Luoyang. Di Chun had no choice but to retreat. If they stayed in Chang and any longer, they would all be wiped out. Seeing the rebel army retreat, the Chang and garrison let out a long sigh of relief. Some soldiers could no longer hold on and collapsed to the ground. This battle was too exciting. For Chang, the most dangerous moment had passed. After defeating the rebel army, Ouyang Shua's prestige in Chang and reached a peak. The civil and military officials' resentment towards Ouyang Shua's arbitrary abolition was slightly alleviated, and the people in the city were even more grateful to Ouyang Shua. The attitude of those high-ranking officials and nobles who had their guards and private soldiers taken away also changed. They forgot their previous reluctance and hurried to ask for credit from His Majesty, describing in detail how their soldiers killed the enemy bravely and protected Chang. The troops sent to rescue the emperor were also busy entering the palace to show their loyalty to the emperor. In comparison, Ouyang Shua, the meritorious official, was somewhat neglected. Whether it was Li Longji or Li Xiang, they would have some problems with Ouyang Shua. The imperial court had already spread the news that they hoped the mutants would leave the city. Fortunately, as soon as the crisis in Chang was resolved, the retired Emperor Li Longji, who had been in fear for more than 10 days, suddenly became restless and refused to leave the Taiji Palace. How could the retired emperor be as free and unfettered as the emperor? In history, when Li Longji returned to Chang and from Shu, he even fought with Li Xiang for a long time, not to mention the current situation. As an emperor who excelled in both politics and martial arts, Li Longji had a deep foundation in the imperial court. There were plenty of old officials who were willing to follow him. Naturally, he wanted to control the imperial court from afar, not be an insignificant emperor emeritus. The ancient emperor's attachment to power was difficult for ordinary people to understand. They would not give up power unless they died. Just like the Qing dynasty's Emperor Qianlong, he once righteously said, "If I am blessed, I will pass the throne to my heir for 60 years. I dare not exceed the 61st year of the Huangzu era." This meant that even if he lived a long life, he would not dare to break the record of his grandfather Emperor Kangshi's 61 years of rule. He would only rule for 60 years and abdicate if he did not die. For this reason, Qianlong had spent a lot of money to build a palace in the corner of the imperial palace for the retired emperor after he abdicated, Ningxiu Palace. At the age of 85, Qianlong had been in power for 60 years. Sure enough, he abdicated the throne to the later Emperor Jiaqing, but he did not move to Ningxiu Palace. Instead, he continued to live in Yangxin Hall, accepting the worship of hundreds of officials. He was still in charge of important military and state affairs, adhering to the rules and making rulings, issuing edicts on major matters, holding great power in his hands. Poor Jiaqing was the fake emperor for 3 years until Qianlong's death. Only then was he able to take charge. The Qianlong emperor did not stay in Ningxiu Palace for even a day until the last day. It could be said to be extremely ironic. Qianlong had even voluntarily abdicated under a beautiful pretense. Li Longji had not abdicated of his own free will, so he had even more reason to interfere in court politics. Thus, as soon as the rebel army left, the Chang, an imperial court, began to stir. The battle between the old and the new monarch party had begun. Ouyang Shua did not care about these things. While the two emperors were fighting, he leisurely went to a street in the west of Chang and to visit a scholar. This person was none other than the famous sage of poetry, Du Fu. Du Fu's life was deeply intertwined with the Enchantment Rebellion. Many popular poems came from this period, including the famous Three Officials and Three Farewells, which vividly reflected the scenes of war at that time. For example, one of the poems, Officials in the Stone Trench. At dusk in the Stone Trench village, officials caught people at night. The old man walked over the wall, and the old woman went out to see. Why was the official angry? Why was the woman crying? Listening to the woman's speech, 3 men entered Yi City. 1 man came with a letter, and the other 2 men died in battle. The survivor lives in vain, and the dead live long. There was no one in the room, only the infant grandson. With the grandson's mother not gone, there was no unblemished dress. Although the old woman was weak, she asked the official to return at night. In urgent need of the Battle of Haeong, she had to prepare a morning meal. The night lasted for a long time, as if one could hear her sobbing. At dawn, she went to the road and bid farewell to the old man. In the battle map, although the participation of the dissimulated man changed the direction of the war, it was still the common people who suffered. Outside Chang, and the tens of thousands of corpses of the common people were the most vivid portrayal. Ouyang Shuo visited Du Fu because he wanted to ask Du Fu to follow him back to Xia Kingdom. Du Fu was born in a noble family in the north. When he was young, he did not have to worry about food and clothing. When he was middle-aged, his family declined, and he failed the imperial examinations several times. His career was not smooth, and he lived in poverty. In the 14th year of Tianbao, which was the first year of the Enchantment Rebellion, Du Fu was 44 years old. He had been in Chang, and for more than 10 years. In November, Du Fu went to his home in Fengxian province. As soon as he entered the house, he heard the sound of crying. It turned out that his youngest son had starved to death. In the imperial court, the civil and military officials all had their own thoughts, and they had mixed feelings about Ouyang Shuo. But among the people, Ouyang Shuo was a great hero. Moreover, Ouyang Shuo was Emperor Xia's honor, and he was the marshal of the military. Du Fu had no reason to reject him. In ancient times, there were not many scholars who could despise the nobles. Name, Du Fu, sage level. Title, Sage of Poetry Dynasty. Tang Dynasty Identity. Xia Kingdom Scholar. Occupation, Special Poet Loyalty. 75 Root Bone. 20 Comprehension. 18 Fortune. 10 Charm. 15 Specialty. Sage of Poetry. Increases Dynasty Culture Index by 10. Increases Dynasty People's Cultural Literacy by 15. Increases Dynasty Poetry Level by 50. Increases Dynasty Poet Breakthrough Success Rate by 25. Book, Dugong Buji Collection Evaluation. The world knows that poets work with a single word, but Lao Du's changes are boundlessly extraordinary and almost impossible to trace. He is the best poet. After successfully recruiting Du Fu, Ouyang Shuo's mood was extremely good, and he didn't pay attention to the matters of the imperial court. He calmly waited for the end of the campaign and received the spoils of war before immediately returning to Grand Xia. As for the matter of sending troops to pursue the rebel army, Ouyang Shuo didn't do that at all. Firstly, the Chang and garrison had suffered heavy casualties and needed to be reorganized. Although there were casualties in the rebel army, they still had more than 300,000 soldiers. If they were to give chase now, it would be no different from sheep walking into a tiger's den. It was extremely unwise. As for those so-called soldiers who came to rescue the emperor, it was fine to have them wave flags and shout battle cries. However, if they were really asked to go and kill the rebel army, their eyes would immediately flicker and they would look around to avoid the topic. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo completely gave up on the idea of pursuing the rebel army. He only ordered the military governor of Jiannan to reorganize the troops and prepare to send troops to Luoyang at any time to cooperate with Guizi's troops to annihilate the rebel army. With the cooperation of the two armies, there was no need to worry about Luoyang not being destroyed. The development of the war far exceeded Ouyang Shua's expectations, and it was even smoother. In the end, Qingxiu still couldn't reach Luoyang. Just as the army was about to reach Tong Pass, there was a sudden report from the front that something had happened in Luoyang. It turned out that after learning that the army had suffered a setback in Chong, and that Fanyang had fallen, the garrison of Luoyang decided to go all out and kill in Lushan. Following that, they announced their desire to submit to the imperial court. The plot twist was too fast, and Qingxiu was caught unprepared. Di Chun and the others, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. The war had ended early, and they didn't have to be involved. If a fierce battle were to break out in Luoyang, who knew how many troops would have to be sacrificed? It wasn't worth it. Following the death of Lushan, a battle announcement sounded. Battle announcement. The War of Enshur has officially ended. The Lushan camp has failed to reverse the outcome of history. Battle announcement. The War of Enshur has officially ended. Now, based on the comprehensive index of the player's contribution to the camp and their contribution to the campaign, additional contribution points will be calculated. A system notification immediately sounded in Ouyang Shua's ears. System notification. Player who says that has no clothes, the representative of the Tang Dynasty camps and humans, has rashly abolished the establishment. Although he has performed meritorious deeds in defending the city, his merits offset his demerits. Additional reward of 20,000 battle contribution points. Ouyang Shua was speechless. There was such a thing? According to the previous battle standards, Ouyang Shua should have received at least an additional 100,000 battle contribution points for reversing the Tang Dynasty camp's disadvantageous situation. Now, he only had a pitiful 20,000 points. Gaia was using this as a warning to Ouyang Shua, telling him not to think that he could do whatever he wanted on the battle map. Ouyang Shua had no choice but to check the battle contribution points ranking. Rank, name, battle contribution points. First, who says that has no clothes, 400,000 points. Second, Feng Xiuhuang, 300,000 points. Third, Di Chun, 250,000 points. Fourth, Wolf Warrior, 150,000 points. Fifth, Xiongba, 140,000 points. Sixth, Chun Xinjun, 120,000 points. Seventh, Wandering Fantasy, 100,000 points. Eighth, Military Kill Ripper, 20,000 points. As the inhuman representative of the Lushan camp, Di Chun had not been able to defeat Feng Xiuhuang. It was probably because he had driven the commoners as cannon fodder, so he had been punished by Gaia and did not receive any additional rewards. Military Kill Ripper was the worst out of the 8. The 50,000 troops he had brought had been used as a reserve force. They had only entered the battlefield at the last moment and fought the 20,000 Tiger Leopard cavalry. He had not received the ideal battle contribution points reward. Such a small amount of battle contribution points was probably not even enough to revive the troops. After the battle ended, Ouyang Shua was preparing to head to the palace to receive the reward for being first. He did not expect to meet a group of eunuchs who had left the palace to announce the imperial edict. It was Li Xiang who had directly delivered the reward. Ouyang Shua could not help but smile wryly when he saw this. How much did the emperor dislike him? After receiving the reward, it was a jade pendant. Ouyang Shua did not even look at the attributes and immediately teleported away. The moment he returned to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shua heard a series of system announcements. System announcement. The Enshur Rebellion has officially ended. The main historical figures of the Tang Dynasty have been automatically added to the game. Please explore on your own. As one of the most prosperous dynasties in history, the Tang Dynasty had many famous historical figures. Apart from the famous 24 meritorious ministers of the Lingyan Pavilion, poets, calligraphers, painters, and other literati emerged in an endless stream. To the Lord of the China server, this was good news. System announcement. The Enshur Rebellion has officially ended. The Qingqing sect and other martial sects have been automatically added to the game. Please explore on your own. As history progressed to the Tang Dynasty, the pugilistic world became more and more lively. Chapter 998. System announcement. The Inshur rebellion has officially ended. Tang Taizong, Li Shimin, has entered Chang'an. The Chang and court has been automatically replaced by the Tang dynasty. Zhang Sun Wuji, Fang Xianling, Gao Shilian, Yuqi Jingde, Li Jing, Hou Junji, Cheng Yaojin, Li Ji, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Tang dynasty. Ouyang Shuo and the other lords were heartbroken when the announcement came out. Li Shimin did not leave any leftovers. Among the 24 heroes of the Lingyan Pavilion in Chang, and Ouyang Shuo was not jealous of the others. He only hoped for the Tang military god, Li Jing. The Flying Bear army still lacked a commander. Other than Bai Qi, Ouyang Shuo loved the Tang military god, the most among the 10 divine generals of China. However, Li Jing had appeared in Chang, and so he could only make a long-term plan. System announcement. The Inshur rebellion has officially ended. Sansan Gampo has entered Luoga city and succeeded the throne. The Tubo power has automatically been replaced by the Tubo dynasty. Guard Dongzan Husong, Shang Jieshi, Shang Shidongzan, Shang Zanmo, Dazhalagang Gong, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Tubo dynasty. Tubo was a regime established by the ancient Tibetans on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. It was the first regime in the history of the region with clear historical records. It lasted for more than 200 years from Namri Luanzan to Langdama. Under the unification of the Tubo dynasty, the tribes on the Qinghai Tibet Plateau formed a powerful force. They gradually walked out of the closed inland plateau, which made the ancient Tibetan society flourish for the first time. The original situation of independent development was changed. Through the construction of systems, laws, and stations, various small states and tribal alliances were integrated. At that time, the Tubo dynasty and the Tang Empire were in-laws. Two Tang princesses, Princess Wensheng and Princess Jinsheng, married into the Tubo dynasty as a sign of friendship. The two dynasties weren't always on good terms either. In 763 AD, the Inshur rebellion caused the Tang dynasty to decline. Due to the need to suppress the rebels in the north, most of the troops in the west of the Tang dynasty were withdrawn. The Tubo took the opportunity to enter the interior of the Tang dynasty. General Dazhalagang, Ma Zhongying, gathered 200,000 troops to attack the Tang dynasty. They occupied a dozen states to the west of Fengxiang and north of Linzhou. In October of that year, they occupied Fengtian and soon reached Chang'an. Emperor Daizong fled to Shanzhou. The Tubo army successfully occupied Chang and made Li Changhong the emperor. 15 days later, under the command of the famous General Guizi, the Tang army recaptured Chang. According to historical records, from 705 AD to 822 AD, the Tang dynasty and the Tubo Empire had formed an alliance 8 times. It could be seen that the relationship between the two dynasties was quite bumpy. When the Tubo dynasty joined the historical process, the first to bear the brunt was the Great Xia dynasty. Sichuan's Chang County bordered Tubo, and it was the only player territory that had a border with Tubo. Fortunately, Sansan Gampo wasn't a very aggressive Zampu. His future remained to be seen. System announcement. The Inshur rebellion has officially ended. Commander Yabgu has taken over Lulan City and succeeded the throne of Kagan. The western regions will be replaced by the Turkic Khaganate, ruling over the various kingdoms of the western regions. The Western Turks had been destroyed by the Tang dynasty, but they had risen from the ashes in the wilderness. Unlike the Tubo Empire, the Turkic Khaganate's territory in the western regions was made up of more than 30 small kingdoms, including Wusun, Kucha, Yinshi, Lulan, Winsu, Gumo, Balu, Shan, Chaishur, Dawan, Anshi, Diwe, and Kanju. The emergence of the Tubo Empire and the Turkic Khaganate had undoubtedly brought new variables to the confrontation between the north and the south of China. It remained to be seen what would happen in the future. If the Great Xia dynasty wanted to open up the Silk Road, they would have to deal with these two powers in the future. Ouyang Shuo didn't have time to think about the Tubo Empire and the Turkic Khaganate. He first settled Du Fu down. Given Du Fu's ambitions, he naturally wanted to become an official in the Great Xia dynasty. However, he didn't have much experience in politics, and Ouyang Shuo couldn't put him in an important position to avoid gossip. After thinking about it, Ouyang Shuo decided to place Du Fu in Jili County as the Yongya County Magistrate. If Du Fu could make some achievements as the county magistrate, he would be promoted. After settling Du Fu down, the system announcement sounded. System announcement. The representative of the poetry world, Du Fu, has become an official in the Great Xia dynasty. Shanghai City will be given the title of Holy Land of Poetry as a reward. Congratulations to player, don't say you have no clothes. Ouyang Shuo smiled. Of course, the Great Xia dynasty didn't lack a county magistrate. As a saint-ranked historical figure, Du Fu's influence and appeal in the poetry world was even greater. With Du Fu becoming an official in the Great Xia dynasty, a large number of poets would come to the Great Xia dynasty. Holy Land of Poetry, increased dynasty culture index by 25, increased dynasty's attractiveness to poets by 50. Since there was a poetry world, there would definitely be a poetry world, literary world, and art world. Ouyang Shuo was looking forward to another essence of Chinese culture shining in the Great Xia dynasty after the 100 Schools of Thought. After returning to the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo took out the jade pendant that Li Xiang gave him and looked at its attributes. Emperor Yu's pendant. With this jade pendant, the player can trigger the storyline quest of the 9 cauldrons of the Great under specific conditions. The player can explore the details by himself. Ouyang Shuo's eyes narrowed. There is nothing special about the jade pendant except for the 9 cauldrons of the Great you mentioned in the description. If Ouyang Shuo's conjecture was correct, the 9 cauldrons of the Great you should be one of the secret treasures of the Great Xia dynasty. One of the conditions to become a dynasty was to possess a secret treasure of the Great Xia dynasty. Ouyang Shuo had no idea how to obtain it before, but now that he had reached this step, he could finally see a glimmer of hope. The 9 cauldrons of the Great Yu? I want it. Ouyang Shuo's eyes were filled with determination. In the next few days, the wilderness was peaceful. Everyone was still silently digesting the impact of the appearance of the 3 major powers in the wilderness. The players of Chang and City were even more excited, hoping to have a wonderful encounter with the outstanding figures of the Great Tang dynasty. The immortal poet Li Bai, the god of war Li Jing, the god of door Yuqi Jingde, the tiger general Cheng Yaojin. No matter which one it was a topic of conversation. The mysterious Tubo and Western Turkic Khaganate also attracted the interest of the adventurer players. To the feudal lords, the Tubo and Western Turkic Khaganate were a hidden threat, but to the adventurer players, it was an unexplored new map with a large number of quests and adventures waiting for them. Therefore, in the past few days, there was an endless stream of players who teleported to Chengdu and then borrowed the route to Tubo. Taking advantage of this crowd, the Mountain Sea Guard's secret agents also blended into the crowd, silently infiltrating the Tubo capital and the Turkic Khaganate to obtain first-hand information for the dynasty. Regardless of what the future held, it was never wrong to know oneself and the enemy. Other than that, what interested the adventurer players the most was the martial arts sects that had just entered the wilderness. As the number of sects in the wilderness increased, there were more and more choices for the adventurer players. In the 5 years of Gaia, the strength of the adventurer players would take advantage of this trend and reach a new level. In the past few days, there were a few historical figures of the Tang dynasty who had come to Shanghai City to settle down, either because they had connections with people from the Great Xia dynasty or purely because of its reputation. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.